This is a haunting story of passion, deception, and a twisted love triangle. A 37-year-old mother disappeared from a friend's home in Omaha, Nebraska in November of 2012. Her abrupt disappearance raised concerns among her friends and family who believed that she'd simply left without explaining why. However, as time passed, it became clear that something way more sinister was at play. This case is a chilling example of how technology and manipulation can be used to commit complex acts of deception and harm. It highlights the importance of thorough investigations and the challenges that law enforcement faces when dealing with missing persons cases and the way cyberstalking can turn into a real-life nightmare. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to episode 3 of the Darklivity podcast. I'm your host, Kimberlea, and I'm here with my co-host and love of my life, Jonathan.
Hi.
If you've never seen our faces before, it's nice to finally meet you. I have a main true crime channel here on YouTube, and many of you are really dedicated viewers over there. So we've been super happy that you've come over here and shown us so much love. And if you're new here and haven't seen my main channel, I will link that in the cards and the description box. Couple things. One, I don't know if you noticed, but we changed our profile picture. It is now both of us, which seems fitting because we're both working hard to bring you the content every week.
That's right.
Secondly, we are catching a flight in just a little while. We really don't know how long we can film, so if there's not as much commentary, you know why.
It's because I'm a little tired.
We're both very tired today. However, we're still going to bring you the same quality on the storytelling and the story and the facts. Just might not break too many times for commentary. And you know what? Some people prefer less. Some people prefer more. But you are going to be talking more.
Absolutely.
So here we go. Darklivity is a word created for this podcast. It's the dark downward slope into the depravity of the human mind and the consequences that such darkness brings to light. And that's what you'll see in each of these cases we bring to you. This is supposed to be a conversational podcast, so we hope our conversations invite discussions from you in the comments. Just make sure to be kind. We read a comment yesterday that Jonathan is actually my son. It's not funny. It was kind of weird, but he's not my son.
Definitely
That would be weird.
No.
The comments we get are a little strange sometimes. But for the most part, everyone has been really kind, and we've gotten so many interesting conversations going on. So we really appreciate that.
Yeah, keep them coming. We love reading them.
We also already have a casualty in our set. Our lava lamp has died.
It's so sad.
R.I.P. We're going to get a new bulb for that. But we've also tried fixing the audio. John's going to talk into the microphone as well this time.
Yeah.
So are you ready to get into it today?
I'm ready.
This is a long one. It's a convoluted one. It's a crazy one, so buckle up. The first person that we want to introduce you to is David Alexander Krupa. Now, Dave was born on October 9th, 1976. He was one of 3 boys, raised Southern Baptist in an idyllic household in South Dakota. He grew up with loving parents Thomas and Patricia, brother Adam, who was 2 years older, and younger brother Max, who came 6 years after Dave. He played sports. He was popular in high school. He was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, all-American boy. They had a Leave It to Beaver type family. They went to church 3 times a week, and Southern Baptists are said to be very strict, following the Bible word for word. His parents valued hard work and loyalty. His dad, Thomas, worked for a printing company for 2 decades, and his mom, Trish, helped local veterans with their benefits, working for the county they lived in for 37 years. They were also married for over 40 years. Everyone knew one another in their town. Their neighborhood was very family-oriented, and Dave and his family enjoyed boating. They had a 16-foot boat that they would take out on the many lakes in South Dakota. Dave said that he grew up in a perfect household, and as he got older and looked back on it, he was very grateful for how much his parents worked to provide him and his brothers everything they needed. After Dave graduated from high school, he headed to Denver, and he served in the National Guard for 2 years. He actually got discharged because they decided to stop paying him. And he questioned them a few times and never got an answer, so he stopped showing up. He figured, this is a job, I should get paid for it. Well, one of his supervisors actually told him, no, you have to come. And he's like, not if you're not going to pay me. He's like, we own you.
Wow.
So he was actually happy when they let him go. While living out in Denver, Colorado, Dave earned his associate's degree in automotive engineering, and then he headed back to South Dakota because of a girl that he was dating at the time. But he also liked being back near his family, and he decided to pursue his bachelor's degree, although he never finished. Because after 4 months of attending, he came to school one day and all the doors were locked. It was abandoned, and it turned out the school was unexpectedly shut down because of financial misconduct by the owner. Apparently, he went to Vegas and he blew all of the tuition money, gambling it away. Luckily, the students were able to be reimbursed, but instead of continuing his education, Dave went back to doing what he knew best and what he was good at, and that was being a mechanic. So he began working at a truck stop gas station in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and that is where he met a pretty brunette by the name of Amy Flora. She was one of his coworkers, and he thought she was really sweet, kind-hearted, and they just hit it off. Dave would wind up spending the next decade of his life with Amy, creating a beautiful family together. Once Amy was pregnant with their first child, the couple moved to Council Bluffs, Iowa, and that is where Amy's family lived. Despite Dave's traditional religious upbringing, he completely rejected the idea of marriage. He decided it just was not for him and nothing was going to change his mind. He actually called it a trap, and he thought the act of living together, being monogamous, and having a family was being married. However, Amy didn't see it that way. She always hoped that once they started a family, Dave would change his mind. Their first child, a daughter named Callista, was born in 2001, and by the time his second child came along, a boy by the name of Trey in 2003, Amy could tell that Dave still wasn't coming around to the idea of marriage. So she had given up on trying to change his mind. I've said this quote before, but I'll repeat it. A man convinced against his will is of the same position still. So a person who firmly believes something to their core, sure, they can be convinced otherwise, but deep down, nothing has really changed. So that's tough.
Yeah.
When two people are in love, but they have very different expectations.
The heart wants what the heart wants.
I feel like it's better to know right away because there are things like getting married or having kids that are deal breakers for a lot of people. And in this case, Amy knew Dave was set in his ways, but she stayed with him because she loved him and they had a family together. Throughout the relationship, they moved several times in order for Dave to accept job promotions. Their first move was out to Madison, Wisconsin, but within a few more years, another job promotion would have them moving to another city not far away called Oshkosh. Overall, the couple lived in Wisconsin for 12 years. However, that all changed in the fall of 2011. Dave's refusal to provide Amy with more of a serious commitment was causing the two to argue quite a bit. Amy had resentment towards Dave, and she felt unstable in their relationship and was still looking for more of a commitment from the father of her children. Not everyone cares about marriage. Some people literally just call it a piece of paper, but others place value on the principle. I know I do. For me, it's like an outward expression of a deep promise that you're going to give to one person. So it's special.
Absolutely.
It's until death. But as we always say, to each their own.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been married. He's never been married.
No, I have not.
Hint, hint.
Ring, ring.
But you know what? It shocks people too because they'll be like, you're 41 and you've never been married? But it's like a big decision to spend the rest of your life with someone.
Right. I don't see a timer on it.
I know.
It needs to just be right. And it's right.
It's right, man.
Wow.
As time passed, their once small disagreements began to escalate into significant conflicts, and that put a strain on the relationship. And on top of that, their financial situation became increasingly harder to deal with. They were always working, and they never had time to have fun, enjoy one another's company, unfortunately. Sometimes they were working while the other one was off, and vice versa. And as people like to say, they were like two ships passing in the night. I've always liked that saying, probably because I lived on a boat when I was in elementary school. So I understood the reference in the real world. Yeah, I lived on a 50-foot S2 sailboat in Isle of Venice in Fort Lauderdale, sleeping with my feet touching my sisters in our tiny V-berth. Those were definitely the times. I like to learn about everyone else in the comments too, because you'd be surprised. Let me know if you've lived on a boat or ever sailed.
I used to go fishing a lot.
Oh.
Deep sea fishing.
I used to do spear fishing. I was
right.
a scuba diver.
Yeah, that's cool.
By the fall of 2011, since Dave wasn't going to give Amy the security she wanted, she told him that she needed to move back to Iowa and be closer to her family. And Dave thought, you know what? Maybe going back will make Amy more content. So they all decided to move back. They moved their family of 4 back to the Council Bluffs, Iowa, and into an apartment closer to Amy's support system. But this was not enough to overcome their problems. Amy still wanted to have more children within the confines of marriage, and Dave had actually undergone a vasectomy by this time because he felt their family was complete. Now that's tough. And that's what I was talking about when 2 people are on different pages. I have no information on whether this was a joint decision, but that pretty much solidified Dave's point of view on the future.
Absolutely.
He was like done at this point. And that was a deal breaker for Amy. She waited long enough. So despite their love and commitment to their children, the couple could not overcome their fundamental differences and, of course, their preferences and what they expected in relationships. So therefore, they separated.
Well, by the summer of 2012, their relationship officially ended. Dave moved 20 minutes away, crossed state lines to Omaha, Nebraska, where he managed a Hyatt tire shop. Even though the apartments would have been a lot cheaper in Iowa, he didn't want to commute every day. He moved in with nothing, letting Amy and the kids keep all the furniture and everything. All he had were his clothes and his computer. So at this point, 35-year-old Dave hadn't been single since he was 22 years old, and he wasn't quite sure how to go about dating. He was renting a bachelor apartment in a large complex made up of a dozen identical brick buildings, each with 3 floors of apartments. It was a really nice complex with a pool, a gym, and in his mind, he thought, well, maybe he would just meet someone organically, maybe in the complex, maybe somebody out on a run, who knows? But that didn't happen, or at least not fast enough. Eventually, Dave was lonely and bored. It was the summer, and the weather was warm, and after working or seeing his kids, he didn't have much to do in his new town, or anyone to do it with. But he did have that computer, so he decided to try some dating sites.
Oh boy. He looked at a few of them and decided on a site called Plenty of Fish. Some dating sites were geared more towards hookups, and some were geared more towards marriage, but had a religious undertone, and none of that is what he was looking for. He liked the concept of Plenty of Fish because Dave wasn't exactly looking for a meaningless relationship, but he didn't want to look for a commitment either. And Plenty of Fish was like right in between.
Mm-hmm.
He sounds like he doesn't know what he wants, which is fine. Getting out of a long relationship, that's hard. And sometimes you don't want to be alone, but you're not ready for something like a set thing. So Plenty of Fish was founded in 2003, and by 2012, it had over 80 million members and 14 million daily users. That's a lot of fish in the sea.
Yeah, a lot of hooks.
And they boasted 60,000 new fish joining the ranks each day. There were over 1 billion messages exchanged on the site, and the basic membership was free. And Dave thought that was perfect.
No kidding.
Have you ever been on a dating? Don't answer that question because I don't want to know. No, I'm just kidding. Have you been on a dating site?
I have.
Oh, great. And that question goes for all of you as well, if you're watching or listening, because this podcast is meant to spark conversations, not just between Jon and I, but all of you. So what are your thoughts on dating apps? My mom and her husband, now of 25 years or so, they met on Match.com. So there are definitely some geared more towards serious commitment, but then there's Tinder. I don't know if it's gotten any better over the years.
I don't know. I've always wanted to find an organic relationship.
Right.
Not something that would seem forceful, but, to each their own, right?
Yeah. So back to Dave, almost immediately, he met someone by the name of Liz Goyer. She was just a little bit older than Dave. She was divorced with 2 kids around the same age as his, a boy and a girl, just like he had. And she hadn't been back in the dating world for a very long time. So they had that in common right away. But of course, this was online dating. So all Dave was able to go on was what she looked like and the very little information that someone puts in their bio. But from what he could tell, Liz was attractive, unconventionally, he thought. And that could sound offensive, but I was looking at her and I thought perhaps, okay, the really dark hair, it was black, tattoos, a little nose ring, just a little stud, for example. And maybe he considered that a little bit different because he's from a religious background. So she was edgy, but he thought she was sexy. She had a nice body, big brown eyes, and he said it, large boobs. And to be fair, he's going off pictures and he's just calling it like he saw it. And he liked what he saw. So they set up their first date And it was a few days later at Perkins Restaurant in Omaha, Nebraska. It was open 24 hours a day and it had a more casual vibe, so they planned to just grab a cup of coffee. Before their date, Dave made it clear to Liz he wasn't looking for anything serious. He explained that he was still healing from a previous relationship and wanted to take things slow. To Dave's relief, Liz understood his position and assured him she was so busy with her business, caring for her children and her pets, she could not get into anything serious. So finally, someone on the same page looking for something casual, low pressure. Plus, it was the first time Dave had ever met a woman online, so he had no idea what to think. He could show up and Liz could have been using pictures from 10 years ago. You never know. People can be whoever they want to be online. So when Dave's first date with Liz came around, he was still really nervous. But they had a really good time. They sat in a booth across from each other drinking coffee, and Dave liked a lot of sugar in his. And whenever he felt nervous, he would use putting the sugar in as a reason to kind of look away, grab a pack of sugar, shake it into his cup, kind of like to break up the conversation because he's like, awkward silence.
Yeah.
I have a lot of nervous habits. I don't know if any of you do. I bite my lips and my nails.
Yeah. I've seen that.
Sometimes until they bleed. So much so I had to get surgery last year on my thumb because it got infected.
I have this weird thing where I bite my knuckles sometimes.
My goodness.
It's weird.
I also like my coffee very sweet.
I did not like my coffee very sweet until we started dating. I used to just drink black, and now I put all the creamer in it.
Oh my goodness. I've been a bad influence. People will always say to me, would you like some coffee with your creamer? You tried my gingerbread concoction the other day and you were shocked.
Oh, yeah, diabetic shock.
But listen, I've come a long way. I used to use 7 equals on top of what Starbucks already makes for sugar.
I remember you saying that.
And I took one FDA law class in law school and I cut out fake sugar, cold turkey. It's just real sugar for me, only real sugar. The other stuff is bad.
Dave was impressed that Liz owned her own cleaning business called Liz's Housekeeping. He thought she was just as sexy in person and loved how much she laughed and smiled. She was a lot of fun, and that's what Dave was looking for. It would take just 4 to 5 more dates, just like that one, where they just sat across from one another, chatting, drinking coffee, before Dave finally worked up the courage to even make a move. So as he was saying goodbye, he finally worked up the courage to kiss Liz. And Liz jokingly was like, "What took you so long?" And he admitted that he didn't even know what the F he was doing. But from then on, things moved fast. That night, they slept together for the very first time. Liz had really boosted Dave's confidence. That's exactly what he needed after a breakup with Amy. Before this, he couldn't help but feel, in his words, worthless. And Liz, well, she gave him a lot of attention and a lot of sex. They slept together every time they met up after this.
You know, it's like they say he needed to get his mojo back.
Yeah.
Like he was kind of down about everything.
You know, coming from a man, it's like, it used to be his validation, right? That's how men feel good. They feel validated, like very primal.
And then they feel like, wow, I can go out there and talk to more people because now you're boosted up and you're ready to get it back out there in the game.
Absolutely.
Put me in, coach.
But on that first night they slept together, Dave was, again, very upfront about the fact that he wasn't looking for a committed relationship, just wanted to enjoy life as a single bachelor. Liz echoed what Dave was saying. She was after fun and sex. Lots of sex. She was much more adventurous than Dave and was constantly surprising him with her kinky requests. Now, Dave actually described himself as kinky as well, but she liked to have sex in public places like parks and movie theaters, and this was something that Dave wasn't particularly interested in. In fact, within a few weeks of dating Liz, he told her that he didn't see a future for them beyond a casual relationship.
At least he's upfront. Like sometimes people just don't vibe, especially in the bedroom or in this case, in public places together.
And what it seems like is he's having to constantly say this to her.
Well, they're just starting the relationship and he wants to make it clear because women can get emotionally attached. I mean, men can too.
Oh, yeah.
But he really wanted to spread his wings and date a lot of different women. And he was. There definitely wasn't a shortage of attractive ladies for him to choose from on Plenty of Fish. And to his surprise, he would connect with someone and before he knew it, he was meeting up with them and usually hooking up with them. There were women who would jump on him as soon as the two were alone. And he was having fun. He felt like after such a long relationship with his ex, he deserved to sort of make up for lost time. And he wasn't just having sex with this long list of women. He was meeting up with them and sometimes it didn't go past a casual coffee date. Not all of them were a match. And if there wasn't even a little chemistry, there wouldn't be another date. Many women were actually looking for a husband. And Dave had the qualities that made him very desirable to women, at least his age. He was attractive, fit, had a stable job, experience with children because he had 2 of his own. He was smart, funny, and he was seen as the total package. He was also very masculine, and many times that is one character that some women are very drawn to. He would wear like a thick beard. Sometimes he would shave it and look a little younger. But overall, you know how it can be. Sometimes women are just in a beeline for getting married, having a husband, having children. And that was already what he experienced with Amy. Either way, Dave wanted to have fun, and he had no trouble going on a number of dates. There were some women like Liz that seemed to want more, and he had no issue being clear about his intentions. He did this with all the women that he dated, and it's true. Sometimes, unfortunately, he made them cry, and he hated that, but he'd rather be honest. Oh, but there was one caveat to Dave telling Liz he didn't see a future for them in a relationship. He was happy to still have sex with Liz until she found someone else or they both did.
Of course he was.
That was fine.
He was polite, but he strongly encouraged her to date other people and told her he would be as well. But this had the opposite effect. Not only was Liz refusing to date anyone else, she had taken down her dating profile on Plenty of Fish. So she was encouraging Dave to do the same. But he made it very clear, once again, that he was having the time of his life and wasn't looking for monogamy. He told Liz very bluntly that he didn't see a future for them outside of sex. He said, quote, "We are not going to ever be together," end quote.
I can't tell you how many times I hear this, especially from men for some reason. Sometimes people don't get the picture. And Dave was being as clear as he could be.
It seemed like every other day. The truth was, Dave wasn't interested in Liz outside of the bedroom. He didn't think she was particularly smart, well-read, or curious about current events like he was. She just wasn't interesting to him. She lacked depth.
So the issue with Liz, according to Dave, was that if he was going to go further than sex with someone, it was because there was something more to that person. Like they had substance.
He knew after a couple of weeks, he was already getting bored and needed to be intellectually challenged. Liz didn't have what it took to fulfill that need. He wanted to see what else was out there. Plus, Liz was already starting to get clingy.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. She would ask him what he did the night before if they weren't hanging out, and Dave would respond with, "That's none of your business." He was always upfront about dating other people, and she had a choice. She could either be cool with it or not. It was up to her.
But Liz was convinced that all she needed to change Dave's mind was more sex and a little more of his time. Why do people think that they can change someone's mind? And why would you want to? If someone doesn't want to be with you and has made it clear, why not find someone who does? Because you're always going to be fighting an uphill battle. But then again, I feel like some people like a challenge.
Like what you said before in your quote, right? You can't make somebody, if somebody doesn't like chocolate, you're not going to make them like chocolate.
But you could force them to try it for a little while.
Right, until they become okay with it. You know, they're not going to genuinely like it.
You know what? When people say sometimes it's Mr. Right and sometimes it's right now. It's like Mr. Right now. She was content with having Mr. Right now, but she was hoping he would turn into Mr. Right. And Liz stuck around for that reason. She was going to try to convince Dave by going on the town, having sex, being the fun girl. But there were times when she was too much for him and he had to put his foot down. And those were the times when she tried to come between him and his kids. Sometimes Liz would try to make him feel guilty for spending time with his children. That is a red flag. She would go one step further and accuse him of trying to get back with his ex, Amy, just because he drove out to Iowa to spend time with his children. There were times when he'd come back and Liz would be accusing him of sleeping with Amy. Dave didn't appreciate those accusations, especially because it wasn't true. In fact, Amy wasn't the biggest fan of Dave. After all, he didn't want to marry her, and now he was dating other women. All they did was communicate about their children and nothing more. So Dave tried to convince Liz that there was nothing between him and Amy. And I mean, he shouldn't really have to.
No.
If he did want to be with Amy, okay, you know, and also if he did, they were together for over 12 years.
Right.
And it didn't work. And then again, if it was his decision to get back with her, so be it. Because again, you can't control everything. But I also understand that fear because they have a connection, they have kids together.
A lot of history.
But in Dave's case, he definitely wasn't trying to get back with his ex. So many times these accusations from Liz would end up in a fight between the two of them. And then they would kind of break up, not see each other for a couple of weeks. I'm saying break up, but they weren't, committed, but they would break apart, fall apart, not see each other for a couple of weeks. But without fail, every time Liz would call Dave and say that she needed his help with something, And being a gentleman, he was always there to say yes, only to realize Liz was trying to seduce him. And she was good at it. She knew how to get him to sleep with her. And because of their physical connection, Dave did have some feelings towards her. They spent a lot of time together. So even though he didn't want to be with her, he did care about her. He was a genuinely nice guy. But they had this back and forth anytime Liz would get clingy and start nagging him. To Liz's credit, she did invest several months into their relationship, and she felt that this entitled her to his time for that reason, and to know important things that he considered his business. Liz even counted the time that they weren't seeing each other. So their in-between time that they had tiffs and they spent apart, she would count that as them being together, as though it held some kind of value and it was racking up. She would spend the night, many nights over his place, and he didn't mind it. He liked the company, but Liz took it as something more. Even though he told her he didn't love her, he wasn't in love with her, never would be, it's like she wouldn't give up on that slight chance. And I couldn't help but think of Dumb and Dumber when he's like, so you're saying I have a chance. But isn't it funny how if it's a man, and let's say he's really persistent over the years, and they say like, oh, she wasn't interested at first, but he kept on pursuing her. It's like, wow, you know, he won her with his charm and his wit and his humor.
Well, there's something to say about the persistence in it, especially if you don't know the person and this person is persistent to get you to know them. That's one thing. But it seems like in this, they kind of know each other. But
in a woman's case is what I'm saying. There's like a double standard because when a woman does it, she's desperate. She's throwing herself at a man. But when a man shows up at your work with a bouquet of flowers for, 2 months. I feel it's
the same thing.
Well, it can be, but I'm just saying, generally speaking. Well, as September rolled around, Liz was comfortable enough dropping by Dave's unannounced anytime she wanted to. And of course, nice guy Dave would let her in and they'd spend time together like a couple. So finally, Liz thought of a plan. She began asking Dave more serious and pointed questions about the way he felt about her. And he still said all the things he always had. But when he added that he cared about Liz, she hung on those words and used them to sort of present Dave with a proposal, like almost like a business agreement.
Her suggestion was to give her a chance to become more than a hookup. She wrote him a long text with all the details of her proposal, asking him if they could try their relationship out, stop seeing other people for 30 days and give their relationship a try. She told him if at the end of 30 days he wasn't convinced to be exclusive, she would move on, and so could he.
I wonder if she read books about habits because statistically, it takes someone about 28 days for them to form a new habit. So maybe she was hoping that would work on him.
It just becomes routine.
But also, have you ever heard the phrase, and I know you have, why buy the cow if you can get the milk for free?
Oh, yeah.
I wondered what would be different about being in a committed relationship with Liz compared to just friends with benefits, especially for a man who clearly wasn't interested in more. And I think her theory was, okay, I'll give him all this sex and he'll never want to leave me. But sex is the easy part.
Yeah.
It's the deeper stuff that's harder to find. Well, the first time he saw this proposal, he literally ignored the text. So Liz tried by email, but still nothing. So she asked Dave if she should just go away. And he repeated what he had in the past. As long as she knew he wasn't going to change his mind on the commitment part, she could hang out with him. And I want to give you an example of one of Liz's emails. It read, quote, I know you have things to think over. Do you really not want to try? Stop overanalyzing everything. What did you feel? I got you to say a little bit today, which was nice to hear. That's all I want, really, is for you to tell me how you feel honestly. And I know it's hard for you. You're very vague about things, and I wish you would open up. I know your past isn't very good, and I'm sorry for that. You're a wonderful man and deserve someone who will respect you. And she went on to write, I don't want to be full of myself, but I'm very good to the man I'm seeing. Sorry, but I deserve someone like you finally. Either you want me to stay or you want me to go, end quote. The thing is, Dave had told her the way that he felt. She wasn't getting the message. It's not what she wanted to hear. And she said that's what she really wanted was to know how he was feeling, but that's what he already gave her. And also, I don't think he was being vague at all.
But, in her instance, she's like, tell me to stay or tell me to go. Because she's still holding on to that feeling.
But unfortunately, with a lot of women and sometimes men, when you are involved in a sexual relationship with someone, you start to get intense emotions for them.
Absolutely.
And when they don't feel the same way about you, but they're not refusing not to see you, you think maybe there is a little hope. And honestly, it can seem kind of unfair. Like the person's playing games. And most of us have been on either side of that situation. And it's usually only fun for a very short amount of time until someone catches feelings, gets hurt. But Dave would respond with like 1 or 2 words after these long, drawn out messages. And Liz would go on to say, quote, "I understand your position at the moment," end quote. Because she expected to circle back on this conversation. It definitely wasn't over, but Dave really wished it would be. So much so, he contemplated just agreeing with Liz's little plan to prove to her that even with 30 days, he would not change his mind. But instead, he said, quote, "I'm prepared to understand that you want more, and I will ask again. That's cool. Are you prepared to hear no again?" End quote. He sent that message wondering just how clear he needed to be with her. And it's exhausting. I'm recounting all of this, so I can only imagine the stress that this would cause Dave. Maybe it would have been good to just cut her loose. Like, is the sex that good?
Never.
I mean, even if it was, is it worth all the drama?
No.
That's a hard no for me. Again, no pun intended. I won't belabor the point by telling you what all the other email exchanges look like, but I read a lot of them, and there were 100 of them, back and forth and back and forth. And I'm telling you, they said pretty much the same thing. I mean, there were other things, like Liz trying to psychoanalyze Dave, insinuating that he was afraid to get hurt, or he was afraid that Liz would cheat on him. But all these emails gave him a chance to use the whole, like, it's not you, it's me. He's actually like, you know what? I'm not good enough for you. He kind of turned it back on her, and he was like, you must have really low standards, considering, she's able to put up with what she was calling his vague responses, him not opening up and playing tug of war with her feelings.
That's a good point. It's like, if he isn't enough, look for more somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted this concrete answer and would tell him, let me know if I should stay or go. And when he would say stay, she wanted more. But he didn't want to tell her to completely go, so maybe that's his fault.
Mm-hmm.
But after this exhausting exchange in the fall, he told her maybe they should just back off. And she accused him of running away. Because
in her perspective, he was actually afraid of the love he would be missing out on without giving her love a chance. And she had also invested 4 months into Dave. And you know what a good analogy is? It's like you like desserts, and maybe you don't want it all the time. And it's nice here and there. It's something sweet. But if someone's trying to shove dessert down your throat, it's not enjoyable anymore when they're forcing it. It's like being friends with benefits while he didn't have anything serious going on with someone that he really wanted to commit to was nice. Like having someone on the side, he liked that. But when you're trying to force it, it's not a turn on anymore.
But after weeks of Liz insisting he give it a try, Dave reluctantly agreed to Liz's conditions and told her he'd give it a shot. There wasn't anyone else he was interested in at the moment. And there you go. That's why he's doing it. Mm-hmm. And he had hoped that at that point, at the end of 30 days, if it didn't work out, Liz would follow through on her promise and move on if he did too. He felt that this was the best decision for both of them. No one would get hurt. They were both mature and could handle this as adults together. Liz didn't seem to trust Dave, especially considering she knew he had been interested in seeing other women before their little agreement, but he would try to convince her that he was staying true to his side of the deal and tried to make the best of things with Liz. And for the most part, the agreement did work out.
But that all changed one day while Dave was at work. That's when he met 37-year-old Cari Farver, a pretty green-eyed brunette who caught Dave's eye right away. She lived in Macedonia, Iowa, about an hour away in a small town with her 14-year-old son, Max. However, she worked as a computer programmer right around the corner from Dave in Nebraska. She went into Hyatt Tire to have her Ford Explorer worked on, just some minor repairs. But right away, there was a natural spark between the two of them. Dave felt instantly attracted to Cari. They chatted and flirted, but Dave didn't think it was right to hit on a customer. So he held back on asking her out. Besides, he had agreed to the 30-day commitment with Liz. But over the next few days, Cari crossed his mind several times, and he promised himself if she had ever happened to come by his work again, he may just ask her out. But instead, fate stepped in. Dave was casually scrolling through the Plenty of Fish app when he came across Cari's profile. Intrigued by what he read and saw, he decided to take a chance and reach out. He sent her a message. It said, quote, "Hey, I know you," end quote. And Cari replied back that she knew him too. And eventually, they took their conversations private. And over the next 2 weeks, they continued to exchange messages.
Okay, let me ask you something. 30-day proposal, we can't date other people. Mm-hmm. But find one scrolling casually on Plenty of Fish. Is that against the agreement? Since they're not dating people?
Let's continue listening exactly what happened. Okay. And maybe you will have your opinion either way. Dave was impressed by Cari's sense of humor, her quick wit, and her ability to get his jokes. But that's what I was kind of saying, because when you asked, he already knows he's not interested in Liz. So he's appeasing her.
Right.
So he's still looking. He's not dating anyone. He's not going outside the 30 days. But he knows in his mind, I'm going to be looking because I am not going to be with her.
Right. Yeah.
And it is important, like humor and things like that, because we get each other's jokes. We're like the same person. We finish each other's sentences.
Sandwiches.
We do. So I think being friends like we were first before anything else, we had that in common. And that's how our relationship grew.
Yeah.
And that's
dating my best friend.
Oh, and that's what Dave was looking for. It was important for him, to connect with someone. And I think everyone has that one thing that connects them with someone, like humor, faith, lifestyle.
You gotta have stuff in common. There was only one issue with Dave and Cari, and that fact was that Dave was still within his 30-day monogamous period with Liz, so he respectfully decided not to ask Cari out. But they did keep in touch. Their conversations grew more frequent and more meaningful, and it became clear that they had a mutual interest in one another. They were both excited about the potential for a deeper connection. Now Dave has 2 women interested in him at the same time. So around this time, his 30-day monogamy period with Liz was about to end, and his feelings about her hadn't changed. They hadn't gotten any deeper, so he knew he would eventually end it, but there was something else he had promised her. Liz bought tickets to a huge Halloween event called the Freakers Ball at a casino. She had been diligently working on their couple's costumes. They were going as Romans.
But I also think this is interesting because I feel like people do this on purpose. They plan trips, they plan events, they buy tickets, and it makes it harder for the other person to leave.
It's like you're trapping them.
Because they feel bad. They don't want to miss it. And that's definitely a tactic that I've seen. I'm not saying that it's always the case because couples naturally plan things ahead of time, but it's definitely happened to me where I'm like, oh no, they planned something. I don't want to break up.
Luckily, Liz had agreed they'd go their separate ways if his feelings didn't get stronger, and he was counting on her to keep her word.
So we asked Cari out. 3 days after the Halloween party, Dave and Cari had their first date together. They went over to the mall and had dinner at Applebee's. I was wondering, is there no other good restaurants in this town? I've never been to a Perkins. I don't know about Applebee's, but I do like Chili's.
I love Chili's.
They have good drinks there.
Yeah.
Dave was immediately wowed by Cari. He thought she was tall, athletic, tan, and just a beautiful woman with captivating eyes and a nice physique. The only downside about this date was that his phone was blowing up. He was getting calls and texts from Liz the entire time because what you didn't know was right before this date, Dave had finally ended things with Liz. Now that they were officially not in their 30-day trial phase, the last thing that he wanted to do was spend time talking to her while he's on a date with Cari, so he silenced his phone. That way he could respectfully give Cari his undivided attention. The date went well. They had enjoyed each other's company. Cari was witty, intelligent, and the best of all, she made him laugh. He was impressed with her expertise in computer coding, and she had just started working at a new job at West Corporation, which was a tech company that May, which he realized was only a half mile from his apartment. So she would be in town a lot. Their connection was strong enough that Dave was comfortable inviting Cari over to his apartment to continue hanging out after dinner. Cari's teenage son was staying the night at her mom's house, and she was hoping that she and Dave could spend a little more time getting to know each other, so she was more than happy to agree to follow him to his place. But embarrassingly, as soon as they got inside, Dave's landline at his apartment was ringing off the hook, nonstop. I'm sure you can guess who it was.
Obviously Liz.
Well, Dave wasn't sure. Because of the amount of times this person was calling, he thought that maybe there was an emergency. So he excused himself to the other room to take the call, but it was Liz.
Mm-hmm.
She was crying hysterically and she was upset and she wanted to come over right then and get her things. That would have been fine any other time, but clearly this was not the time. And Dave was honest with Liz. He said he had company over, he was on a date, and it was rude for him to have to answer the phone. He asked her to please stop calling and they'd talk later. Well, Liz apparently didn't get the picture, or she didn't care, because within minutes of hanging up, his intercom outside the apartment was buzzing again and again, like zzz, just over and over again. And Liz was downstairs and she wanted to be let in. She said she had to come up right away to get her personal belongings that she'd left at his apartment. Okay, and I see both sides of this. I'm a pretty neutral person. She's hurt. She liked him more than he liked her. But to be fair, he gave her that 30 days. And as much as it sucks, the mature thing to do was respect his wishes. And as far as her things are concerned, it's not like he's holding them hostage. It's just not an appropriate time to come in.
I mean, this was her idea to begin with.
The 30 days?
Yeah.
But I also know some women who intentionally will cause a scene in front of the new girlfriend or the new girl. It's not uncommon. It's a tactic sometimes also to like, you get dressed up after the breakup, you get dressed up. You're like, oh, I need to come over and get my things. And then you know that's not what it is because you don't need your damn toothbrush. You can buy a new one. And they're hoping that you'll see them again and you'll just get swept off your feet. But in this case, Liz wasn't even being kind. She was outside screaming at Dave with Cari hearing everything. Liz demanded that Dave give her back her clothes, a toothbrush, and some pots and pans that she had brought over. Dave told her it could wait until a better time, but she refused. She was yelling, she was carrying on, and she needed to be let in now. She needed her things right then and couldn't wait. She even threatened to call the police if he did not allow her to get up there. Her face was red. Tears were pouring down her cheeks. She's like, I want it now. She was like banging on the glass down below.
Gosh.
And that's tough too, because I think you do have a right to your own belongings, like even if they're in someone else's house, but to call the police?
Yeah, but Dave could have easily just put them in a box. Oh, she was there. She was already there. He
could have grabbed them up.
He could have grabbed them, like handed it to her. I suppose so, right? So Dave apologized to Cari and said it was an ex-girlfriend outside, and she wasn't taking the breakup well. Sensing the tension, Cari said, yeah, I understand, and encouraged Dave to deal with the situation, and she would just go home. But before leaving, Cari asked Dave to call her when things calmed down, indicating she was still interested in continuing their time together. As Dave was walking Cari out of the building, Liz was waiting at the door to come up.
Awkward.
Very. As Cari left, she had to walk right past Liz. Dave obviously didn't introduce the two women, nor did either one of them acknowledge the other. Instead, the two women passed each other without a word spoken. That's probably a good thing, right?
Especially with the tension so high.
Absolutely, because after Cari got into her car, Dave allowed Liz up to his apartment to get her things and leave. He wanted to sever every last thing or string between them. He wanted to get it done quickly, especially after such a disrespectful scene.
But once Liz was inside his apartment, her sense of urgency was over. Of course it was. As Dave gathered up her things and started handing them to her, she wanted to talk about their relationship.
All part of the plan.
Yes, I told you. And she argued with Dave over the callous way, in her opinion, that he had so easily discarded her and even replaced her. Now that's tough because many people do not like confrontation and they aren't completely honest, but Dave was. For example, what I mean by that is some men or women will say, you know what, I'm not interested in a commitment. But then a month later, they're literally in a committed relationship. They get married to that person, the whole nine, right? But what they really are trying to say is, I'm not interested in a commitment with you.
Right.
By this time, Liz felt that she had invested several months into their relationship, and she wasn't going to be going away that easily. The two had a heated argument, and Dave accused Liz of purposely ruining his night, but she insisted she had no idea he was on a date. Dave was irritated that she ruined this first date with a woman that he could potentially consider becoming more serious with. In the midst of their argument, he finally told her very firmly to leave and go home. So she did. A lot of men, women too, but they value respect. And when you disrespect them, it's hard to come back from that. Some say that men value respect over love.
That's good, right? Because how can you love somebody who doesn't respect you?
Yeah, so it's like a circular way of thinking about it. As soon as Liz left, Dave called Cari to apologize, and she was still driving home at the time. So on a whim, she invited Dave to come over to her place where they wouldn't be bothered by anyone. It was only 9 p.m., so he accepted the invitation. Now they could be in peace and get to know one another without Liz interrupting them. Once he arrived at her cute little farmhouse about an hour outside of town, she was making them a cup of coffee. Her home was filled with unique antique pieces mixed with a modern touch. Dave was really enjoying the conversations with Cari. He actually thought she was smarter than him, which turned him on. And within 2 minutes of them sitting on the couch together, they immediately started making out, and their physical chemistry was off the charts. And it was clear that they were heading to the next level fast. But before Cari allowed Dave to join her in her bedroom that night, she had to set some ground rules and some boundaries. She told Dave that her 14-year-old son, Max, who I told you was at his grandma's that night, would always come first. She was so busy with her job, she wasn't looking for anything serious right now.
She wanted to make it clear that by sleeping together, she didn't want to send the message that she was looking for a relationship. She was looking for a physical connection. She suggested a no-strings-attached encounter, and Dave felt like he had won the lottery. That was exactly the kind of non-relationship type relationship he was looking for. Dave stayed over that night, and over the next 2 weeks, they saw each other almost every other day. Dave couldn't believe the smart and beautiful woman was so perfect for him. Anytime Cari was without her son Max, she would stay the night at Dave's apartment. It was convenient for her because even though it was an hour away, it was actually within walking distance of her job. Her regular commute to work was sometimes over an hour, so this was great for her. And Dave saw a plus because it meant that they could see each other more often. During the time Dave was spending with Cari, Liz seemed to understand Dave's stance on everything, but she hadn't completely gone away. In fact, she was still hoping Dave would give her another chance after he was done with this new woman. She had been emailing him every day, sometimes more than once a day since the breakup, now wanting closure. When he didn't have a chance to open the emails, she was already writing him back with sarcastic things like thanks for the non-response and just bombarding this man with messages.
If Liz is the type that likes to challenge, this was an even bigger one now because Dave is now seeing someone else. Yeah. So now she's like, I'm going to get him. I'm going to win him.
But he made it clear to Liz that he still wasn't interested in continuing their relationship. However, he was cordial about it and he agreed to bring over the rest of her things that she had left at his apartment. So he did just that the week of November 6th.
From the moment that he walked into Liz's place, it was clear that she had seduction on her mind. Dave was unable to resist the temptation. They stripped down right inside the doorway and the two wound up having sex right there. For that moment, he forgot all about Cari. Not intentionally, and they weren't even exclusive at the time, but he wouldn't have even met up with Liz if it wasn't for her insisting that she get her stuff back. This isn't something he planned on telling Cari about. He never discussed his personal business with the women that he was not committed to anyway. When they were finished, Dave told her nothing had changed. He still didn't want a commitment. And once again, Liz was devastated by the rejection, but she did appear to accept the reality of the situation. No amount of sex or begging was going to make this man commit. So the next time she emailed him, it was kind of to say, all right, I'll see you around. If she wasn't too busy. Now she's trying to make it look like she doesn't have time.
I got better things to do anyways.
If I'm not too busy, maybe I'll see you again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so don't come for me. But I feel a little bad for her. I mean, sure, yeah, she's being annoying and pushy and clingy and desperate, but I don't think Dave is blameless.
Right. I mean, if you don't want to be with the girl, stop being with the girl. Like, you have to have your willpower as a man, right?
But she chose to keep coming back knowing that she was going to get hurt.
Dave allowed her to come back.
Okay, we're going to agree to disagree. Early in November, Cari had told Dave about a huge coding project that was due at work that month on the week of the 12th. So instead of spending the extra time commuting each day, Dave had an idea. He suggested that Cari just stay with him that week so she would be close to her work, and she thankfully accepted. She came over on Monday the 12th with her suitcase, and by Tuesday the 13th, she was up by 5:30 in the morning working on her coding project. Her coworkers were counting on her finishing her part that morning so they could progress to the next portion. She sent an email to her boss and her coworkers around 6:15 a.m., providing an update and telling them that she would be in the office in a few hours. Once Cari got to the office, she was supposed to verify the accuracy of her work and start on the next portion of the project. Dave had to be at work at 6:30 that morning, and as he left, he saw Cari sitting on his couch, still dressed in her pajamas, working from her laptop with all her paperwork laid out and her phone nearby. He kissed her goodbye, and they made plans to have dinner together later that evening. By this time, Dave had developed genuine feelings for Cari, and he thought that maybe she was feeling the same, even though the relationship was still more casual. He hoped that the relationship would continue to progress, but then Cari did something that caught him off guard, and it made him have second thoughts. At around 10:15, he got a text from her. She was asking what he thought about her moving in with him, not just staying there for a week. And for a moment, he thought, okay, she must be joking. Of course, he'd been generous. He invited her to stay over for her convenience and to gradually get to know each other. But to have this woman permanently move in that quickly, he just wasn't ready. Dave felt overwhelmed because he thought, is this going to be another situation like Liz where Cari is misinterpreting his intentions? And it kind of rubbed him the wrong way. He was stunned. He was stunned that she would even ask. So he gave her a one-word answer, no. And her response came back immediately. It was like 30 seconds. And in no uncertain terms, Cari broke it off with him. She texted him back to back in a series of messages, things like, fine. And then like, F you. I'm actually seeing somebody else anyway. Don't contact me again. I hate you. Go away. So like not all in one sentence, but just like,
oh,
yeah.
Wow.
And he was not expecting that.
I wasn't either.
Well, maybe she had a plan. And she's like, wait a minute. I can get into his house. It's close to my work.
Dave still wasn't sure if this was a joke or not. He was like, what the hell? He thought, well, you know what? I've only been dating her for about 2 weeks. So what could he possibly know about her?
Right.
Right?
It's a new relationship.
Yeah. And besides that, these texts were annoying and uncalled for. So he put his phone away for the day and continued to work.
Cari had done some other strange things that day. At 9:42 a.m., using her work laptop, she logged into her personal Facebook account and unfriended Dave. And this was before the text to him asking if she could move in. So something seemed to have changed while Cari was all alone at Dave's. Did she see or experience something that made her test their boundaries? And maybe that confirmed to her that Dave wasn't relationship material. So she was like asking him, okay, can I stay here? When Dave got back home that evening, there was no sign of Cari.
She had taken all of her things, including her laptop and suitcase. He couldn't help but to feel confused and hurt. They had been getting along so well, or at least he thought. How could things have turned so badly? A part of him was disappointed because he felt like he had a real connection with her, and they were on the same page in regard to the expectations of the relationship. But another part of him was relieved and felt like he dodged another bullet. I mean, considering how Cari responded.
Right.
Since leaving Amy Flora, the mother of his children, he had dated many women, but the two that stuck around for more than a date or two were Liz and Cari, and both appeared to be very unhinged. He wasn't interested in riding their emotional roller coasters. It seemed like if they didn't get what they wanted on their terms, they would throw a fit.
And he still couldn't believe how Cari would have instantly changed out of the blue. When he left that morning, she was pleasant, and they were looking forward to spending the week together. But when he got home, there was this eerie silence that he wasn't expecting. He couldn't reconcile how she went from this amazing person to hostile in the span of 4 hours. The fact that this seemingly promising relationship imploded so quickly was actually further confirmation to him that he needs to stick to casual dating for the foreseeable future. Unfortunately, just like Liz wouldn't go away, it seemed like Cari wasn't going to go away that easily either.
Wow.
I feel so bad for this guy. No wonder some people are not interested in getting close to others.
Sure.
Within days of their abrupt breakup, Cari began sending him hundreds of text messages. The new messages were directed at his ex, Liz, and she was calling her very degrading names. These messages call Liz a, quote, fat, ugly whore, end quote, and other very vulgar things. Okay, so I was thinking, had Cari maybe somehow found out that Dave slept with Liz when he went over to give her back her things?
Possibly.
I mean, it's true, he and Cari were seeing each other at the time, but they weren't committed. Eventually, Dave stopped responding to Cari's texts because he wanted nothing to do with her if she was going to continue talking to him that way. But it wasn't just text messages. There were also long emails. Cari would be going on, demanding he better not be with Liz and asking why he just couldn't commit to her. She even brought up wanting to get married.
That's when Liz began calling Dave too. He was being bombarded.
Wow.
But not because she wanted to reconnect or to speak to him. It was because she too was receiving abusive texts and emails from Cari, calling her names and demanding that she break up with Dave, and they weren't even seeing each other. So Liz wanted to know how his ex, Crazy Cari as she called her, had gotten her information. It was obvious to Dave that Cari had gotten Liz's email and phone number from his computer when he left her in his home alone. Liz was really upset and blaming Dave for bringing this woman into her life.
So I know snooping is common. We've all done it somehow, some way. I'd rather know if a guy isn't serious about me or know his true intentions, but there are definitely boundaries. Like taking somebody's phone number information and then doing that would definitely cross the line.
Oh yeah. Although Dave didn't intend on seeing Liz again, they eventually did meet up to discuss what was going on with Cari and also what they could do to stop it. Liz was now a target of Cari's hatred. She was afraid for herself and her kids.
And Dave felt terrible that Liz had gotten dragged into all of this, and he apologized profusely for getting her involved in the situation. They were both expressing their concerns, and Dave learned the full extent that Cari had gone to harass and stalk Liz. Apparently, she had broken into Liz's garage and she spray painted the words whore from Dave, like as though it was from him and he did it. And neither one of them could understand why Cari had become so psychotically jealous, especially because Liz and Dave were not even dating. So Dave felt even worse about these violations. But it was later when Liz informed him that she noticed checks were missing from her checkbook that Dave got really concerned. He decided it was time to go to the police and report the stalking, the break-in, the stolen checks, and the vandalism. The Omaha Police Department took down the report. However, it was one good thing. Liz wasn't really concerned about the checks because thankfully they were old. They were from an account that she had closed down a while ago. However, as the police investigated, they informed her that didn't seem to stop Cari from attempting to use them. So she was trying to bounce this woman's checks. On November 17th, Cari had forged a check from Liz to herself for $5,000. The checks were in Liz's legal name, Shanna Elizabeth Goyer. The police began an investigation into Cari Farver. They were unable to make contact with her by phone or at her house, so they got in touch with her mother, Nancy Rainey. What they found out was even more confusing. But first, let me tell you what Nancy told them about her daughter, the Cari that she knew. Mothers always know a different version, right?
Oh, yeah.
Cari Lee Farver was born on November 30th, 1974, to Nancy Bisbee and Dennis Farver. She had an older half-brother, John, Dennis's son from a previous marriage, and an older brother, Adam. But her parents ended up getting a divorce when she was only 18 months old. However, they remained in touch and on good terms for the sake of their children, and eventually Nancy remarried to her high school sweetheart, Mark Rainey, when Cari was just 6 years old. Cari grew up very close to both sides of her family, her dad and her stepdad. They lived the small-town life in Macedonia, Iowa. As a child, Nancy described Cari as adventurous, independent, smart, and beautiful. Her teachers would often say that having Cari in class was like having another little adult in the room at school. She was always mature for age and quickly moved into the gifted classes. She and her mom also enjoyed theater. They had a common interest and they would spend time doing community plays together. Cari had no problem with the boys. She always had a boyfriend and one of them turned into more. That was when she finally went to college at the University of Kansas. She met a guy, fell in love, and found out she was expecting a baby. Even though things didn't work out with the child's father, Cari was able to get support from her mom and lived with her while taking some online classes. And then in December of 1997, little Maxwell was born. Her son Max was the love of her life. I mean, he looked just like her. But times weren't always easy. Cari was a young 20-something single mother, and eventually she started suffering from what seemed like depression. She couldn't get out of bed, and Nancy was so concerned. She had never seen her daughter like this before. There was a lot going on in her life, though. Once she was able to see a doctor, she seemed to benefit from medication and therapy. At one point, she was back on her feet and moved to Topeka, Kansas with Max. But after another short-lived marriage that ended in divorce, Cari was finally ready to settle down in her life. She moved back to her hometown in Macedonia, and she purchased her home from her grandparents. It was close to her brothers and her father, who was near the end of his battle with stomach cancer. Cari was extremely close with her dad. She took Max to visit him in hospice every day. The upside was that Cari had landed her dream job as a computer programmer for West Corporation, and things were going well, or so Nancy thought. Now Nancy felt like something very bad had happened to her daughter. They were close. They lived down the street from one another. They talked nearly every day. And sure, she knew that her daughter could be strong-willed, and she could be a lot for someone to handle. She was also known to be a bit of a free spirit, but this seemed different.
Nancy informed the officer that Cari had previously been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And recently, Nancy had been getting texts from Cari that seemed to indicate she was not in her right mind. Something seemed pretty wrong. Back on November 13th, the day that Cari left Dave's, she texted her mother and she told her that she was leaving her job and moving to Kansas and that she wanted her mother to take care of Max. Nancy told Cari to call her right now. Cari refused. Nancy was very disturbed by these messages because she thought Cari loved her new job and was extremely happy with her life at the moment, which wasn't always the case in the past. So she wondered what prompted this sudden change. Cari was also very connected to her family and her small community, so Nancy thought it was odd for her to suddenly cut them all off, but that's what it seemed like she wanted. After 3 days of not hearing back from Cari, Nancy knows there's something wrong, and that's what prompted her to go to the police, but there wasn't much the police could do besides take down Cari's info. She was 37, 145 pounds, 5'7", Caucasian female with brown hair and hazel eyes.
I call them green. They're very pretty. but they called him Hazel. I think Hazel could be green or brown.
Yeah, I think it's like a mixture of both, right?
I mean, she was still active on Facebook. She was texting. But then as time went on, Cari missed her brother John's wedding the following weekend. And her son Max was in the wedding as an usher. In fact, her brother had moved the wedding date so that their father could be in attendance because he was so sick. So Cari's absence from her father's side and her brother's wedding was extremely alarming. According to the book, A Tangled Web by true crime author Leslie Rule, Max's eyes were glued to the door just waiting for his mom to walk in during his uncle's wedding. He was heartbroken and felt abandoned. Nancy tried calling her again and again, but she received no answer. While Nancy was hoping to hear from her daughter, Dave Krupa was hoping to never hear from her again. Going back to the check that Cari forged on November 17th, Cari texted her mom and told her that she had sold her bedroom furniture and wanted her mom to let the buyer into the house to take delivery. Well, Nancy was shocked because this bedroom set was a family heirloom from Cari's great-grandparents. So she demanded Cari show her proof of payment, like show me that this person's really purchasing. So she sent her mother a picture of a check, a $5,000 check, and told her that a lady named Shanna Goyer was the buyer. We know that that is Liz's legal name and that Cari stole this check. So Nancy refused to allow this buyer inside her home until Cari answered her calls. She told her daughter, unless you call me and you talk to me about this, I'm not going to assist you with the purchase of the furniture. This, of course, enraged Cari. She sent her mom a string of really angry texts. She lashed out. She was calling her mom a bad mom, said she was controlling, and that's why she had to be cut out of her life. The text exchanges were laced with rage, and it sounded nothing like the daughter she raised.
All the while, Cari remained active on Facebook. On November 21st, she wrote, quote, moving to Kansas for a great job. Will miss my family and great friends, end quote. Then, a few days later, Cari wrote, quote, hey, got a great guy, Dave Krupa, moving down to Kansas now. If I can get my son to move with me, I'd be so happy, end quote. Dave was confused by this Facebook status, right? I mean, he hadn't seen Cari since she broke up via text on November 13th, and Cari's family had no idea what to believe. These exchanges and her Facebook posts terrified Nancy because how different her daughter sounded. They were riddled with grammatical errors, and Cari was a stickler for spelling and punctuation. The words chosen, how they were carelessly misspelled, the bad grammar, the hostility, and the tone of the text, something definitely did not seem right.
So after receiving all of these messages and still not hearing from her daughter, she once again contacted the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office in Council Bluffs, Iowa, and told Deputy Carl Reister that she was concerned about her adult daughter who still hadn't shown up. Then she gave him a copy of that check from Shanna Goyer. While the deputy was polite, he didn't seem concerned about Cari or the bad spelling, the missed commas, the Facebook posts. He didn't think they were proof that anything nefarious had happened to Cari. On the contrary, once he knew that Cari had a history of mental health issues, it just solidified his belief that this was a bipolar woman that had gone off her meds and was spiraling into the middle of a breakdown which her family was refusing to accept. He thought this was a matter of someone going off their meds and voluntarily walking away from their life. The officer told Nancy that Cari was a grown woman and she did not need to check in with her mother. Well, Nancy was frustrated because in her gut, she believed something terrible had happened to her daughter, but no one seemed to believe her. What the deputy didn't know was Nancy didn't think her daughter was bipolar at all. She thought that she had actually been misdiagnosed when what she was really experiencing at the time was a bout of postpartum or situational depression. Cari had previously had anxiety and depression after each one of her divorces and in other appropriate times in her life when she was under a tremendous amount of stress. And we know she had that big deadline at work when she was at Dave's that week before all of this craziness began. What Nancy said Cari didn't ever exhibit were manic episodes or breaks with reality. However, Cari was taking meds for anxiety and depression, and she had left her prescriptions behind at her house when she left. Knowing her daughter the way she did, Nancy refused to believe that Cari was suffering from a mental breakdown. However, the thought of her having a breakdown brought her comfort because Nancy knew there's no shame in mental illness, and the breakdown theory gave her hope that Cari would be okay. They just needed to find her and get her the help that she needed. There were so many intrusive thoughts going through Nancy's mind. Maybe someone was holding her captive and forcing her to send these texts. Nancy thought maybe the programmer was a way to communicate a message that everything was not okay and to come find her. No one had seen her since November 13th, and Dave was the last one that had contact with her in person that day. The thoughts going through Nancy's mind were debilitating. One moment she was worried that Cari had fallen victim to a human trafficker, and the next she was worried that Dave was involved in her daughter's disappearance, or it could be her ex, Alec. She actually had a restraining order against him, so maybe he found out that she was dating Dave and he kidnapped her.
So Cari never showed up for work the day that she spent the night at Dave's. Her supervisor stated that Cari was one of the most reliable employees at Westcorp, and she would usually let someone know if she was going to be late. That wasn't like her at all. When she called Cari's phone, it went directly to voicemail. Her team was counting on her that day, and she wouldn't have let them down. When Cari's employer reached out to Nancy to tell her, hey, Cari didn't show up for work today, Nancy realized she received a text message from Cari saying she was taking another job. Nancy was stunned because she knew Cari was so happy at Westcorp, but none of this made sense. After missing the wedding and a close friend Amber's baby shower, these were two events Cari had actively participated in planning.
To complicate these matters, there were actually two separate police forces investigating two separate cases from two different states. The Potawatomi Sheriff's Office in Iowa was handling the missing persons report, and the Omaha, Nebraska police were handling the stalking and the vandalism reports from Liz and Dave. Neither agency was aware of the other at the time, and Nancy didn't even know that Cari was accused of stalking other people. She thought that she was the only one getting messages. The Potawatomi department contacted Cari's work and was told that she was acting completely normal when she disappeared. Actually, a couple days after her disappearance, Cari sent her supervisor a text message resigning from her position. She said she was moving to Kansas for a new job opportunity and gave them the name of a candidate to take her place. That person actually did show up. They filled out a job application. They were interviewed, but it turns out they weren't qualified, so they were not hired. Police added Cari to the missing persons database and listed her car in connection with the investigation.
So at one point, Cari even told Dave she was living in his apartment complex in unit number 12. Only his complex didn't have a unit number 12.
Oh.
But she insisted that she was his neighbor and could see his comings and goings. She would text him and tell him, I know you're in your lazy boy wearing your blue shirt and watching TV. Other times she would send him photos of himself sitting in his apartment through his window. Each time, Dave would run outside hoping to catch her, but she was always one step ahead.
That's scary. I would be a wreck. Imagine someone showing you pictures of yourself.
1 week after Cari disappeared, Deputy Sheriff Randall Phillips took over Cari's missing persons case and visited Dave's workplace to question him. He proceeded to interrogate Dave relentlessly, bombarding him with a barrage of questions. Dave felt like the officer approached him in a manner that suggested he already believed that Dave was somehow involved in Cari's disappearance.
Well, to be fair, partner violence is high up on the list of reasons that women are murdered. And secondly, he was the last person to see her. So it's actually reasonable that they believed he can be involved.
Dave willingly provided his statement to the detectives, firmly denying any knowledge of Cari's whereabouts. He made it clear that he had no desire to be involved in locating her either.
Yeah, he wanted nothing to do with it. And in an attempt to support his claims, he showed the detectives all of those texts from Cari. He's like, look. And this revealed that Cari repeatedly actually blamed Liz for the relationship's downfall. Well, this gave the deputy an idea. If she was still using her phone, they could ping it. So on November 18th, they sent out a ping and it showed that Cari's phone was still located in Omaha. It appeared to be in a residential neighborhood with a lot of businesses and restaurants nearby. So they went over there, but there was no sign of Cari or her Black Explorer. They could, however, tell that she sent 11 text messages in the last 24 hours.
Wow.
But there's more. As the investigation progressed, Cari took matters into her own hands. She texted the deputy herself. She reached out and said, quote, I don't care about this missing persons report, but I really would appreciate it if you leave Dave Krupa out of it. I will be leaving the state. My mother overreacted. I've been to my house a few times, end quote. And this deputy told her, listen, if you get stopped, even in another state, you're still going to be held until this matter is resolved because they had to figure it out.
Right.
And she had done things, that they needed to get to the bottom of. Cari ignored that and went on to say, quote, Dave texted me and said that you had a sheriff at his work. Please stop talking to people. I have nothing to say to anyone. I want one person to go away for destroying everything for me, end quote. Well, the deputy, he was concerned with the choice of words because she wanted Liz to go away. So he contacted Liz himself, warning her and suggesting that she go make a report. So Liz then texted the deputy a screenshot of a text that Cari sent to Dave regarding the checks. And the gist of it was that Cari admitted to Dave that she took Liz's checks and she was almost bragging. She was like, I'm not going to contact the police because I want Liz implicated in my disappearance so that she can go to jail and then you can't be with her. And this aligned with the theory that they were dealing with this unhinged, jealous woman in a toxic relationship gone wrong. You had a scorned woman that wanted revenge.
By Thanksgiving Day, Cari had already been missing for 2 weeks. Despite the special occasion, there was no sign of Cari's presence. This was the 3rd time that she had been absent to a family gathering. During this time, Nancy decided to reach out to her with a heartfelt message. She informed Cari that she had prepared a roast in the crock pot and that they would be eating around 6 o'clock. She was hoping Cari would still come around. Nancy also mentioned that they planned to go to her dad's place for Thanksgiving and that the family expressed their love for Cari. However, Cari remained silent and didn't respond to any of the messages. Next, she would miss her own birthday on November 30th. And that lack of response continued even when Cari's father passed away a month later.
Yeah. That's crazy that she didn't even see her father.
And there's still nothing. Surprisingly, she didn't even attend the funeral, which left Nancy and the rest of the family pretty puzzled and hurt. She even missed Max's 15th birthday on December 7th.
Wow, now that's unreal. Her only son.
Something in the back of Nancy's head was still telling her that something was very wrong. But Cari and her car were still missing, and without anything else to go on, it was merely a waiting game.
Everyone tried to go about their normal lives, but it was hard. Dave would get dozens of texts and emails in a 24-hour period. From Cari demanding he stop dating Liz and go back with her, to telling him she could see him in his robe as he got out of the shower. But Cari wasn't happy with just stalking Dave and Liz. She also began sending texts to the mother of Dave's children, Amy Flora. She accused Amy of sleeping with Dave and using her children to get back with him. This was despite the fact Amy had moved on and even had a child with a different man. And speaking of Dave's kids, he no longer let them out of his sight when they came to visit him. He was so scared. What's ironic is that Cari's constant harassment eventually brought Liz and Dave back together. So it accomplished the opposite. They found peace and solace in each other's company because they were navigating this relentless harassment together. They would compare text messages, and it was the only way they could fully comprehend and validate what the other was going through.
Yeah, misery loves company.
The text became their shared experiences, their shared truth, and Dave was glad how understanding Liz was about all this. After all, if it wasn't for him bringing Cari into Liz's life, she wouldn't have to deal with it. And it was exhausting. They would both block Cari's number and her email address, but then another new number and account would pop up just as fast and the harassment would begin again. Sometimes they'd be watching a movie together and Liz's phone would get an alert from across the room. She had to get up, go over there and find out that it was a harassing email from Cari. And what do you know? At the same time, Dave would get one on his account. What are your options? I mean, they've already gone to the police. They're blocking her numbers and her emails. So what is a person supposed to do? Every time a new email address would pop up, there were usually variations on Cari and Dave's names, which was so strange. The emails would be like Dave's Girl Cari or Krupa Cari 76 or Just Cari 29. It was really weird. Sometimes the messages were actually a little bit sweet and nice, kind of. Like she'd send Dave an I love you or I want to be with you. And then it seemed like when she didn't get the response she wanted, she would text him, I hate you. You've ruined my life. And it really did seem bipolar. I don't mean the diagnosis. I mean the back and forth, two different polar opposites. 1 minute she wants him, the next she hates him.
In one text, Cari told both Liz and Dave's ex-wife, Amy Flora, that she was actually pregnant with Dave's baby. And she told Dave she wanted what was best for the child and hoped that he would help figure things out.
Wow.
Of course, Dave knew this couldn't be true considering he had a vasectomy after the birth of his second child. And Cari had a hysterectomy, would virtually make it impossible for her to be pregnant.
Is it always 100% though? Because I've heard that sometimes, maybe it's with a reversal, but does anyone know? I'm also tempted to ask, has anyone ever dealt with an ex doing any of this? Liz responded to Cari sometimes, especially when she had apparently had enough. After hearing about the pregnancy one, she wrote Cari back saying, look, I like Dave, but this is too much. If you want him, have him. Just stop terrorizing me. But Liz still stood by Dave. It was the least she could do. But their relationship didn't come without their problems. Dave was still honest with Liz and said while he was happy to keep seeing her, he was still interested in dating other women. He told Liz if this didn't work for her, he understood. And Liz would send these long emails swearing that she wasn't trying to trap him into an exclusive relationship. In one, she stated, quote, "You have to stop thinking that I'm trying to get you to commit to me. Stop thinking that I'm mad," end quote. But there were still signs that she was trying to manipulate the situation in other ways. She told him since they had known each other for 7 months now, she was owed a certain level of seniority status. Oh my, I know, it's like she wants a hierarchy of the other women. Like she's dating him the longest. So this kind of reminds me of Hugh Hefner. Sure. When he had his girlfriends, remember there was always like the main girlfriend. So she told Dave he owed her at least one date night per week. That was 52 days a year. And Dave's doing the math. And he seemed like, you know what? That's a reasonable expectation. So he agreed. And Liz was happy that she got that one day of the week to herself with Dave. It was Wednesdays. But she also thought that she was entitled to know what they were doing when they weren't together. I knew it. So you give them an inch, they take a mile. And Dave would repeatedly tell her that is none of her business, which would eventually lead to an argument. He also started to notice a pattern on the days that he had dates with other women. On those days, Liz would show up at his apartment unannounced before the date, seduce him into sex, and then leave. She wanted to drain him, and I'm not just talking about his energy. She wanted to make it less likely that he would be craving sex with these other women. He used the phrase, wear him out. She would try to wear him out. After the third or fourth time this happened, Dave realized what she was doing, and he put an end to it. Even though it had no effect on his desire to pursue the woman he was going on these dates with, she pulled her little trick. He would tell her all the time to go out there and, in his words, just go get laid. He wanted her to enjoy herself and not worry about him saying, you know, he's not the only guy out there. But Liz would respond by saying she had morals. She wasn't going to do what he was doing. Like all of a sudden she's judging him, even though she slept with him without even knowing him that long. Liz would demand to know all about the other women in his life and would even create, wait for it, fake Facebook profiles.
There we go.
To try to friend these women on Facebook. Stay away from the dating apps, everyone. And this actually crossed the line, and it was obvious to Dave and his dates that Liz was trying to get information on them.
It was now a back and forth where Liz would overstep Dave's boundaries. He would break up with her, and then things would fizzle out for a few days, but then just like clockwork, Liz would create some kind of emergency to reestablish the contact. She would usually create a situation where Dave would have to come and rescue her, which he felt obligated to do because of the abuse that she was still enduring from Cari. Yes, it was still going on. And remember, on top of this, he's still dating all these other women. Plus, those other women in his life were also enduring this abuse. Dave couldn't figure out how, but Cari kept getting Dave's new number every time he changed it. And somehow she discovered the identities of these women he was dating.
Wow, that's extreme.
Somehow Cari always knew the women he was talking to on Plenty of Fish. One woman got a text from Cari telling her that if she didn't stop seeing Dave, she would kill her and slit the throats of her children.
Okay, that is next level, and I hope that they went to the police.
I hope they did.
And if they did, Cari is racking up evidence.
Well, Cari made these same threats to Liz and her children as well. Eventually, all the women in Dave's life would eventually realize being involved with Dave came with a crazy stalker. So many times, he just wasn't worth pursuing.
It made sense to Dave that since Cari was a computer programmer, she could probably hack into his phone and access his dating apps and text messages. Nothing else could explain how she was always getting access to every detail of his life. And that's right. She's a coder.
Makes sense.
About that. I'd feel so trapped. Like, how do you get away from someone using technology unless maybe you get like a burner phone, something that they can't get into? The other thing was, Dave was a heavy sleeper, and he even wondered if Cari was getting into his apartment at night, getting on his computer and phone while he was sleeping. That's terrifying, because he had actually given her a key to his place the week she was supposed to be staying with him, and that key had never been found. I wonder if he at least changed the locks? I would immediately.
Absolutely.
One time, Dave woke up to a series of messages from friends and acquaintances, and they were responding to an inappropriate text message that looked like it came from his phone. But get this. On his side, the messages had been erased, but all the recipients had screenshots of these nasty text messages, and it was shocking to him. Cari had even texted Dave's old girlfriend from high school and called her a whore. The message warned this woman to stay away from him, and Cari even began to interfere with Dave's work. He had to explain to his boss what he was going through, that he was being stalked, and that he promises he didn't send any of the nasty messages to his coworkers because, yeah, they got them too. Another time, Dave's work had been vandalized, and this too began to interfere with his employment. It's like everywhere he went, destruction or disruption followed. We've only told you what Dave, Liz, and Dave's acquaintances and friends were dealing with, but Nancy was also experiencing her own hell. On January 6th, Nancy logged into her Facebook account and saw that there was a message from Cari. She was excited. It was from a new Facebook account that Cari created. The message said, quote, "Mom, why are you not talking anymore?" End quote. Nancy asked if this was really Cari, and she said, quote, "Yes, Mom. The other account was hacked. I'm sorry I missed the funeral," end quote. But Nancy told her the only way that she would know it was hers if she called and heard her voice. This enraged Cari, and she said, quote, "Everything is about phone calls. I was just heading to bed. Who else would know about Dad? Fine, I'll call you sometime. I just wanted you to know I'm okay. I'm happy. I may not be the greatest person in the world right now. I will call you, but I'm done after that. You have Max, and I'm grateful. But after the cop stuff from before, I'm done. I'm not a 10-year-old mom. I can leave him and move on with someone new," end quote. Cari was implying that she had moved on with another man. There was a post on her Facebook of a hand with an engagement ring, and the caption said, quote, "Davey and I got engaged," end quote. But Nancy noticed that the hand was like plump and had short fingers, and she knew that Cari had a thin hand with long fingers. So Nancy was like, this is not my daughter's hand. And a side note, I can always tell someone by their hands. I think it's one of the most personal characteristics, in my opinion, not just because of fingerprints and all that, but I'll always recognize my mom's hands, my grandma's hands, of course, yours, my daughter's. It definitely stands out, like the way that someone's hands look. So Nancy knew that that was not her daughter's hand.
Right after Cari disappeared, there were 2 suspicious purchases on her debit card. Because she didn't respond to the fraud alerts, the bank froze the account. Cari's last check had been deposited and she had a balance of over $10,000, but it hadn't been touched since she disappeared. So how would she have been getting by? Nancy knew something was terribly wrong, but she couldn't get the police to believe her. She told you she was going to get to all the evidence racking up against Cari. Well, by now, there was a warrant out for her arrest for malicious destruction of property.
Once again, Nancy went to the police. They contacted Dave, and of course he said, "I'm not engaged to Cari." And actually, things were about to become far more serious. He had some very disturbing things of his own to share with the police. The messages Cari sent were about to take a sinister turn. It was evident that wherever Cari was, she was still closely watching Dave, and she had it out for Liz and anyone she loved. Cari had sent Liz a text message threatening to kill her and her children and burn down her house. But wait, because it gets worse. Dave tells the police he received an email from Cari a little after midnight with a picture of someone who looked like it could be Liz tied up in the trunk of a car. The person's face was covered with duct tape, which added a sense of dread and uncertainty. It was shocking and disturbing for him to take in this sight. It was deeply unsettling. How frightening is that? There was duct tape over their hands and their mouth, and there was only a partial side profile of their face showing in this picture. But you could tell that they were helplessly lying in a trunk and they needed assistance. Cari's message read, quote, "Do exactly as I say and I will let her go," end quote. Then Cari instructed Dave to break up with Liz or she would kill her. She ended the message with tick tock, as though he didn't have much time. Dave didn't believe she was serious. He thought that he could at least reach out to Liz and just make sure she was okay, but she never responded. Through all of this odd behavior, Dave had refused to believe that Cari would hurt anyone. But despite his doubts, he decided he needed to inform the police about this situation, telling them that Liz eventually did text him back later, asking, "Why were you trying to get a hold of me in the middle of the night?" And that's when he explained that the psycho was playing games again. This was just another thing to add to the Omaha police records. And the next day on January 7th, Dave was driving through his apartment parking lot when he thought he saw a black Ford Explorer with snow on top of it that looked like Cari's car. And it looked like it hadn't been driven for days. It was the only one that still had snow piled up on top of it from a recent snowstorm. Since it matched the description of Cari's car, he reported it to the police. They came out. They towed it to the Omaha police impound lot. This was a big clue. Now, was it true? Did Cari actually move into Dave's apartment complex and that is why the car was parked there? At this point, Nancy owned the car, which had been reported as stolen. And now both police stations were in communication with one another, the one handling the missing persons and the one handling the stalking and the vandalism claims. Thankfully, now they can cross-reference their evidence and information. Dave and Liz were interviewed, and they both gave officers permission to download the data from their phones. There was literally thousands of messages for the police to sift through.
Yeah, I can imagine.
On Thursday, January 10th, crime scene technicians began to process Cari's vehicle. This consisted of taking photographs of the interior and exterior and making notes of anything that stood out and dusting for prints. A scratch was reported on the side, and the entire interior had been wiped down and meticulously vacuumed. The cloth seats still had those vacuum marks across them, and there was a very light pink colored stain in the center of the passenger seat. It didn't appear to be blood, more like maybe a juice stain, but it was still documented. The floor had tiny pieces of debris and dirt, and they found Cari's Westcourt parking permit in her visor. But after a thorough search, there were no fingerprints found anywhere.
Wow.
Inside or out, not even on the rearview mirror, which we know we always touch, or not always, but we do, or the steering wheel. None on the steering wheel.
Sounds like foul play for sure.
But there was a container of mints that was left in the cup holder. And this was a brand that Cari was known to purchase and keep on hand. They dusted that container for prints, and they found one unknown fingerprint. It belonged to someone that was not in the APHIS system, so they had no idea of knowing, is it Cari's or is it someone else's? There were actually no signs of foul play. So the car was released back to Cari's mother. And well, I would agree with you that wiping everything down.
Yeah, exactly.
But in their point of view, there wasn't anything that stood out. Like they didn't see a gun or something in there that would lead them to that. When Nancy saw the vehicle, though, she was shocked by that cleanliness. While Cari was neat at home, her car was a trash bin on wheels. There was always something thrown on the floor. Her belongings were everywhere inside. So this seemed very odd to her.
Months later, on April Fool's Day, Liz's car was vandalized. Someone scratched "whore, stop seeing Dave" into the side of it. After all these months, the messages still haven't stopped. Then, 17 days later, on April 17th, 2013, Nancy got a call from a man who identified himself as Dave Krupa. He told her Cari was at a homeless shelter and needed to be picked up. But one thing she did think was that she would never see Cari again, so she had to go get her. Her and her brother Jeff drove over 30 minutes only to find out it was a horrible prank. Cari wasn't there.
Oh my gosh. And I know you must be sick of hearing all this. I couldn't take it. This is so much to deal with in real life.
Oh my gosh, so many mental games.
I just wanted it to end, and I'm sure that Dave and Liz and everyone else did too.
Well, in the beginning of May, Deputy Phillips did a full search of Cari's home. Everything was just as she left it. There were no signs that she packed up and moved away. If so, she left every single thing she owned behind, even sentimental items, pictures, clothing, everything.
That's weird.
The deputy documented the home, took photos, and collected some things he thought may be important. A camera, a checkbook, planner, and a resume that was typed out but had handwritten notes on it. He took receipts he found from the Hyatt tire shop and some medications prescribed to Cari. In all this, he wasn't any further in being able to figure out what was going on.
By May 3rd, Max was finally ready to send his mother a message on Facebook. It was his turn to see one of the odd responses that other people had received. He sent this message to Cari's new account. It simply said, quote, "Hi." That's all. Cari responded by saying, "Hey, little man, how are you?" She had never called him little man before, and he was 15 years old by this time, and she had missed his birthday. He was devastated at the thought that his mom would leave him. It didn't make any sense. Max had to know if this was really his mom. So he had a plan. He asked her 3 questions. What's my middle name? What is the name of our first boxer? And who was my best friend growing up? Cari never responded again. And Max got his answer. This person wasn't his mother. It's eerie, but I'm sure you already knew there was a lot more to this. But wait, because it is insane. Carrie's mom, Nancy, had a vivid dream after Carrie's dad passed away. He appeared in front of her and he said, "Don't worry, Nancy. She's with me," referring to Carrie. And it's so scary, it woke Nancy up. She found this experience to be more than just a dream. She felt like it was a message from beyond the grave that her daughter was dead. I have super vivid dreams. I mean, he actually talks in his sleep too. But I personally do think somehow, don't think I'm weird, you can get signs or messages in your dreams. I don't know how, but I've experienced it before.
I think dreams are pretty powerful.
The same month, Dave received a disgusting email from Cari. It was a picture of Liz's kids taken from outside of her house. The message talked about how Liz's kids were so ugly and that no one wanted to see that ugliness anymore. That's harsh.
That's messed up.
Talking about and bringing up someone's kids, and it's also scary.
Right. You may wonder how things are going with Dave and Liz. Well, they were seeing each other here and there, but not as much. And the messages from Cari had become less frequent as time went on. Actually, Dave had met someone new that month on Plenty of Fish, a woman named Jessica McCarthy, mother of 2. And they had just taken their conversations off the site and over to Facebook. But once they friended each other, Jessica got a nasty message from an account with the name Cari Farver, asking her if she was Dave's new whore, and said Dave had herpes.
Wow, that is really bad.
She threatened to mess up Jessica's car like she had to Dave's other whores. Of course, Dave had to explain what he's been dealing with for the last 5 months, but the messages wouldn't stop. The next one came just a couple hours later saying that she would scare off any women who tried to get close to Dave.
And the last line was eerie. It read, "He was sleeping with 3 people I know about, and I got rid of 1 whore." The next message was loud and clear. It said, "I will kill you and your effing kids. I killed a dog owned by Dave's last whore that he tried to be with." When Jessica, who was frightened and worried for her kid's safety, blocked this account, another one with a similar name would message her. That is unreal. Jessica, of course, reported these messages to the Douglas County PD on May 11th and decided not to pursue anything with Dave. They hadn't even met yet. That same day, Liz and Dave get an email with a link to a site called remembered.com, where people can post obituaries of loved ones, and they were shocked to see that there was one for Liz.
Weird.
It had her name and her photo and her birthday, June 28th, 1975, and her death date as May 11th, 2013, the same day. And below the picture, and I don't want to laugh, but below the picture were the words, quote, "I didn't know her very well, except she was a whore and a man stealer. She kept stealing my man. She was unable to get her own man, that she has to keep taking everyone else's men. Thank God she's gone. Good riddance to you." And it was all spelled with wrong words, bad grammar, run-on sentences. It was so bad. That's why I had a hard time reading it, because I want to laugh because it's almost so ridiculous, but it was scary. Liz was terrified. She was seeing her own obituary, and Dave tried his best to reassure her those were empty threats. This went on for months. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you each and everything that happened in every message and text, but I'll give you a quick play-by-play for each month. In June, Dave had a brick thrown through his window at his house when he was over at Amy's visiting his kids. By the end of the month, his car had been keyed with the words, "Dave loves fat whores." This person really likes the word whore. This is not something that's usually in my vocabulary, and I've said it, I think, the most I've ever said it in my life.
Yeah, me too.
Today. And they're also not very creative because the messages lack depth. They're the same. They're redundant every time. But in all seriousness, this wasn't funny. It was far from it. It was hard not to laugh because it's so crazy. But these were real people that were being affected by all of this. And by July, Dave's new date, Sally, was the stalker's new target. If he saw her, he'd get a text or an email that same day from Cari saying that she already had the whore's license plate number, she knew the color of her car. And on a couple occasions, Dave and his 12-year-old daughter thought they saw someone inside Dave's apartment. And one time when he was walking home from a bar, he saw someone in the bushes, but he had been drinking. So he thought maybe he hadn't been seeing things. No, there was someone there. Dave was so sick of explaining these things to friends, families, dates, and even the police because nothing was ever done about it. It seemed like it was a waste of his time. But finally, a new detective was put on the case. Paul Prencher from the Omaha PD Special Victims Unit, and a warrant was out for Cari Farver's arrest. Sure, she was still a missing person. She hadn't been seen in 8 months, but now if she was going to get arrested. Oh, and there was a new character that had entered Cari's emails to Dave. It wasn't one of Dave's whores this time. It was a man. Apparently, Cari's new leading man, Garrett Sloan. Early in January of 2013, Dave got a very peculiar message, and he was so used to deleting them without even reading them that he barely gave it a glance before pushing delete. But had he dug into it, his head would probably be spinning. I know mine was. I'm doing my best to keep all the facts straight because this is the most convoluted case I've ever done. But this Garrett guy, he was apparently Cari's new boyfriend. It looked like she had finally moved on, but it seemed as though Garrett was now reaching out to Dave for him to reassure them there's nothing going on between Dave and Cari. And it got weirder. From what Garrett suggested to Dave and Liz in his email, he was under the impression that Cari was on good terms with them. He asked them to go on a double date. I kid you not.
Wow.
And then he's like, Cari's here. She asked me to message you. And of course, I can't say no to a beautiful lady. But it didn't end there. Garrett explained to Dave that he was actually one of Liz's exes.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Cari has somehow seduced and began dating one of Liz's exes. And now Cari is insisted that Garrett reach out to Dave to make sure, 1, him and Cari are done, and 2, oddly make sure that Dave is treating Liz well and he's not going to hurt her.
And he said something like, if you really don't want to be with her, then let her know because she deserves a good man. And then he was sort of like, take care of my girl. It makes my head spin. I don't know what's going on, but it definitely sounds like someone is off their rocker.
But life went on. This was Dave's new normal. He was still seeing Liz here and there, but they were also doing their own summer thing. Liz was actually moving into a new home, so she was busy packing her and her kids' things up and preparing to get all the things set up in her new place. So she didn't seem to be so upset when Dave broke things off with her in early August. And that was nothing new for their constant back and forth. Boundary breaking, the nagging, Dave had to explain that he wanted freedom to see other people. So maybe this time the breakup would be good and Liz would finally move on and be out of his life. But he wouldn't be that lucky. On the morning of Saturday, August 17th, 2013, Dave received a frantic call from Liz. Cari had struck again. Just when they thought this was all over and she'd move on with Garrett, Liz was screaming and telling Dave her house is on fire. Dave is shocked. He doesn't know what to think. All of Cari's threats had been empty in the past. Did she finally follow through with this? Dave immediately left work and raced over to Liz's house, and sure enough, it was on fire.
Wow.
Liz was standing in the middle of the road, hysterically crying, and Dave ran over to comfort her.
This time it seemed like Cari was willing to kill for Dave because sadly, there were 4 fatalities once the flames were put out by the Omaha Fire Department. 4 of Liz's family members didn't make it. No, her children were safe, but 2 of her dogs, a cat and a snake, all perished in the flames. And that breaks my heart so badly. I can't even imagine my dogs, which are my babies, being killed like this. It's pure evil. And luckily, Liz and her kids were in the process of moving out and had already been staying at their new place, so they were spared. The preliminary search of the home revealed clear signs of arson. There were cans of gasoline, as well as piles of clothing all around that indicated areas where the fire was deliberately started, and there were at least 6 different points of origin. There was a gas can in the middle of the living room, and someone had taken this from Liz's shed out back. Liz and Dave both told the police and the fire chief who was out there investigating that it could only be Cari Farver. And now, Cari was facing arson charges on top of the charges for criminal mischief and vandalism. Dave also showed them an email from Cari that he got in that morning. He didn't read it at the time, but now he's showing police. It said, quote, "I'm not lying. I set that nasty whore's house on fire. I hope the whore and her kids die in it," end quote. It seems so straightforward. Arrest Cari Farver because she's the one doing this, but they still couldn't find her. Cari was not only skilled in computer technology, but she also used software to disguise the way she sent messages, and she concealed her location. So Liz was so scared, she didn't even give Dave her new address. She made it clear that she blamed him for letting this psycho into their lives. And Dave understood, and he did his best to be there for her. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to give him your new address because his phone and his email keeps getting hacked.
Absolutely. Cari can see everything.
Exactly.
The messages didn't stop, and every month there was something else. In October, Dave's work was vandalized with bright orange spray paint across the front windows. It read, "Dave beats women. Dave knew this wasn't true, but tried explaining all this away, especially to your boss who's already heard these stories before. People usually think you had to have done something to deserve this. Luckily, this was fresh, so he and some of his coworkers were able to scrub it off. He absolutely would have been fired if he couldn't get it off. This time of year brought Dave back to the fall afternoon, a year before when Cari first set foot into his life. It was at that very spot where he worked. His life has changed so much since then.
Yeah.
But he had changed not for the best. He gained at least 40 pounds and had been smoking cigarettes and drinking heavily to cope with the stress and anxiety. In November, he got an email from Cari that said, "To my, quote, husband, David Krupa, I'm creeping around in your building with my new knife," end quote. She included a picture of a large knife next to her driver's license, along with an envelope with her name on it, almost to prove, hey, it's me, as though you already didn't know.
That's wild. Why would she keep calling him her husband? Now she's creeping around with knives.
Right, it's a lot. She's trying to prove it.
It's like she wants to get caught in his mind, you know?
Yeah.
It's almost like cat and mouse. Like she's like, come find me.
Right.
Catch me if you can. Here's my license.
In December, another call to 911, Dave reported someone had broken into his apartment. He and Liz stood with an officer explaining that a screen was missing from the bedroom window, and a bunch of Liz's things were destroyed. Her clothing was slashed, and there was writing on the wall that read, quote, "Go away, whore," end quote. None of Dave's things were touched. Moving to January of 2014, and now you'd think Dave could live in peace, but no. He had an old flame from South Dakota come into town. They knew each other for years. They grew up together. Her name was Heather. They'd always kept in touch and kind of hooked up when both of them were single. And at that time, they were. So naturally, Heather came to hang out with Dave for the weekend.
As soon as they stepped foot in Dave's apartment, his phone was blowing up. And once again, he had to explain to yet another girl the story about Cari. He assured her everything would be okay, but Heather was terrified, especially when they moved into his bedroom later and they heard rattling like someone was trying to get into the front door. And moments later, they hear a loud crash. A brick had been thrown through the bathroom window. And Heather, she's hysterical, but Dave's calm. This was what he was used to, sadly. But to Heather, she begged him to call the police. He knew there was no point, but he did it to make her feel better. They came out, they took a report, and that was that. Heather pressed Dave for more details, so he ended up telling her the entire story. It's sad that he has to spend his whole entire night talking about an ex or this person that's in his life. But at the end, she made a comment that none of this made sense. Why would a successful, smart, well-put-together, beautiful woman like Cari, who he only dated for 2 weeks, care this much and stalk him and the girls that he dated for almost 2 years now?
Doesn't make sense to me either.
It's almost like she was trying to wake Dave up, like open your eyes. She straight up suggested it was Wednesday girl who threw the brick.
Wow.
And that is what Dave called Liz, his Wednesday girl, that one day a week he always reserved for her. It made more sense to Heather that Liz, who was still in his life, who always wanted more, who begged to be with him, she had more of a reason to try to scare off other women. But Dave knew that couldn't be true. He witnessed Liz receiving the same harassment. I mean, Cari burned down her house, killed her pets. And actually, all this commotion made Dave nervous for Liz because bricks had never been thrown through his window while he was home. So he figured that Cari had upped the ante. It turns out Liz was okay. And a couple months later, while they're still talking, she gets the chance to accompany Dave on a little trip back to his hometown, meet a few of his old friends, including a woman named Tay. Now, Tay had been a childhood friend of Dave's since he was in diapers. And after they spent a little time over there, Tay said goodbye and told Liz she was welcome anytime. She was just being pleasant. She wasn't really extending an open invitation for this person she doesn't know to come visit. But a few days later, Tay opened an email from Dave to be shocked by a very inappropriate video of him having sex with Liz.
Wow.
Can you even imagine the embarrassment of a childhood friend getting a video of you?
Yeah. Oof.
Oh my God. So of course she called Dave right away and she's like, why in the world would you send this to me? He was so embarrassed. He knew right away that somehow Cari had once again hacked into their devices and shared a very intimate video Liz had taken of her and Dave together. He apologized profusely, but what was more shocking to Tay was when she gets a phone call from Liz a few weeks later. Liz was acting as though the two of them had known each other forever. She's like, hey, Tay, what are your plans for this weekend? And Tay was like, I'm just hanging out. So Liz asked if she could come over and stay with her for the weekend and have girl time together. So Tay, not wanting to be rude, this is her friend's girlfriend, or like a girl that he brought over and he's seeing. She said, sure, not even thinking that Liz would drive 3 hours to go stay at her house. When she arrived, she just sat right down at the kitchen table with her new friend Tay, and they told each other stories about, you know who, Dave. And of course, crazy Cari gets brought up, and they're down this deep rabbit hole of the story when guess who shows up? Heather. She's also friends with Tay. They all grew up together. She comes by not knowing that Liz is there.
Wow.
And of course, Tay is glad because she wants some relief from having to keep talking all night. And she quickly introduces the two of them. Well, when Liz heard the name Heather, she immediately snapped, quote, oh, you're the one who came to see Dave. He should have brought you over to my house when crazy Cari threw that brick, end quote. Heather wasn't a fan of Liz.
I can imagine why.
She had her suspicions and she'd heard the whole story. So she snapped back and said, quote, I don't even know you. Why would I come over your place? End quote. To which Liz responded asking, so what were you doing over Dave's anyway? Just prying into her personal life. And Heather, she's a badass. She goes off on Liz. She's like, you know what? Dave and I have been friends with benefits for decades. I was here before you. And I'll always be here. You're just Wednesday girl. And she walked out.
Oh.
I know, the drama.
Wow.
The drama that these women have between all of them and Dave.
Dave.
Poor Dave.
I'm pretty sure that's the first time anyone stood up to her.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, when Heather left, all Liz did was grill Tay about Heather. She wanted to know how many times Heather had sex with Dave, as if Tay even kept track.
Right. She's like, oh, putting like a check mark, like those little lines. Like, oh, she told me she had sex with him there.
Liz even asked Tay if Tay had slept with Dave too.
Wow.
And of course, Tay was like, no, I'm married for one, and he's like a brother to me, right? Because they've known each other since they were in diapers.
Exactly.
Tay suggests she and Liz go over to Dave's parents' house, and she took her over there to Tom and Trisha's.
Wow. Like she's taking her over.
So
that's confusing.
Yeah, what a weird suggestion. Once they arrived, Liz went right into the Cari story. She had both of them worked up over it. They already knew of Cari and the stalking, but not to this extent. Tom told Liz he already gave Dave a gun, but maybe he needed more, and Liz agreed. But then she had the audacity to begin talking badly about Amy, the mother of Trish and Tom's grandchildren, a woman that they loved.
In Liz's opinion, she didn't think Amy should be getting any of Dave's money for child support. Well, Trish didn't know this Liz person very well, and she didn't appreciate her trying to insert herself into Dave's personal affairs, especially suggesting that Trish needed to talk some sense into her son. She told Liz he's a grown man and he can make his own decisions. But this actually wasn't the first time that Trish and Liz met. A long time before this, Dave went over to visit his parents. And while over there, Liz called and she wanted to be invited, but Dave told her it wasn't a good time. Well, guess who showed up anyway? Liz. Yep. She came right up to the front door unannounced and claimed, you know what, I was close by at an event and I just dropped in. She lived 3 hours away. Wow. She just wants to be part of his life so badly. Are y'all getting the vibe that Liz is not in her right mind? And I don't want to forget the time that Tom and Trish, they went to visit their grandchildren and they took Dave and the kids out to eat. And guess who showed up uninvited? Liz. And then she proceeded to buy a very expensive meal and expected that the Krupas pay for it. She didn't just want to be in his life. She wanted to be part of every part of his life, like every inch of his life she wanted to insert herself. And maybe that's just the perspective we're looking at it from. Maybe if we heard Liz's side, then things would seem different because Dave was still seeing her despite all of this. And Dave was still being tormented by Cari. At least 6 times on dating sites, he would go to meet up with someone only to find out that Cari had created a fake profile of these women and connected with Dave only to tell him, gotcha, after he showed up.
Wow.
And these women never showed up to meet him.
Oh boy.
So we're now in March of 2014. Just think about how much time has gone by since this first started.
Like 3 years, right?
Yeah. And I'm not going to go into detail because this is just the tip of the iceberg of everything that was going on year after year regarding Cari and Dave. It was 5 o'clock in the morning on St. Patrick's Day, and someone called in a wellness check at Cari Farver's address because a woman named Cari, spelled the same way, on a website called meetme.com had posted about taking her own life. So of course, police go over there, but there's now a tenant living in Cari's old house that her parents now own. They wake this person up, and Cari is, of course, not there. For some reason, the holidays were always days when Cari's family was filled with hope and despair. Recall, first it was the other St. Patrick's Day, then it was Mother's Day. Cari's family was still filled with despair, and Max was devastated about his mother leaving, and so was Nancy. Both of them get a text on Mother's Day from an unknown number. Nancy's text read, quote, "Happy Mother's Day, Mom. How's Max?" End quote. To which Nancy replied, quote, "Call me and I'll tell you," end quote. But that call never came.
By the fall of 2014, Liz had a new job at a distribution warehouse, and she met a new friend, a woman named Cherokee. They became pretty close pretty quickly, confiding in one another, and of course, Cherokee tried to give Liz advice on how to get Dave to commit to her and only her. They came up with a plan, a threesome.
I want to laugh, but I'm trying not to.
How is that
but
a plan?
I don't know.
Cherokee suggested that maybe Dave needed to sow his wild oats, but she pretty much knew nothing about Dave because he was seeing other women nonstop. This wasn't the problem. How many different ways can this man tell Liz that he does not want a commitment?
I don't know. He's said every way I can think of.
Dave wasn't completely opposed to the threesome, but wanted to meet Cherokee first. So I'm not going to go into detail, but it ended up just not happening. It was just another weird ploy.
Some reason people out there, and it seems to be women, they think, oh, if I'm really kinky and really sexual, if I give him all these fantasies, he's going to think I'm the cool girl, I'm the fun girl, I'm the wifey material. And I know we're not going to go into full detail about the Cherokee story, but it was also just weird. Like it ended up that Cherokee was texting, or there was something going on where then Liz got jealous because she thought Cherokee was going behind her back. Drama.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And I honestly wish that I could say it was all over, but I have to tell you that it continued till Christmas. And the new year was almost there. Amy had a new baby at the time that was 8 months old, and she had this baby with a different man, but she still spent time with Dave and their kids. And this year they decided to do a little Christmas at Dave's. Well, I probably don't have to tell you this, but Liz shows up uninvited and pretty much ruins everything. And Amy, by this point, cannot stand being around Liz. She just brought what Amy considered very negative energy with her. As soon as she came in, she already started arguing with Dave. So Amy just told the kids, you know what? I'll see you guys when you come back. And of course, they were disappointed, but Amy left. And by the new year, I'm finally happy to announce something positive. Dave was moving.
Finally.
Yes, he was going back to Council Bluffs, closer to his kids, and by default, that meant closer to Amy.
Yeah, hopefully safer too.
This is something that enraged Liz, and of course it did. We know how jealous she is. And as you said, Cari is also still stalking him, and his dad purchased a gun for him. Well, he goes out and purchased a second gun because he wanted to ensure that he could protect himself and his family if he ever needed to. However, as time went on, things calmed down. There were fewer and fewer messages and interactions between Cari and Dave. And as a result, him meeting up with Liz, that became less and less frequent as well.
Right, because they weren't in the same city anymore.
Right, and so it makes it harder, even though they're only like 25 minutes away.
Cari's case was still unsolved. She was still missing, but in the spring of 2015, a new set of eyes began looking into it. Two detectives from Potawatomi PD, Jim Doty and Ryan Avis, were intrigued. They were like, how does someone go missing for almost 3 years, but still be active on social media, still text, go on dating sites, and all these other places, having interactions and burning down someone's house, but not getting caught? It was a mystery. They just had to get to the bottom of it. So they actually requested to work on this case. The detectives determined that Cari had not used her bank account or social security number in over 3 years. And the only people who reported having contact with her were Dave Krupa and Liz Goyer. The detectives decided to use a unique strategy in solving the case. Detective Avis would investigate the case as if Cari were still alive, and Detective Doty would work the case as if Cari had been dead from the date of her disappearance 3 years earlier.
I love that. That's so unique, and it's like a good way to break up the case and have two different perspectives.
Absolutely.
They quickly determined that there was no evidence that Cari was still alive. She had seemingly abandoned her only son, who by all accounts was described by everyone as her whole world. She had abandoned her house, which was now in care of her mother, her car, and all of her possessions. She had not withdrawn the $10,000 in her bank account, and she even stopped using her credit and debit cards. Not to mention, she missed her brother's wedding, her dad's funeral, and now both detectives were convinced they were investigating a homicide. I just want everyone to take a minute and let this sink in for a second. Everything that we've told you, just let it sink in. Because this case, when it starts unraveling, it is so twisted and so evil, it doesn't even seem real, but I can assure you that it is. Because of how immense the digital evidence was, they needed to call in an expert. So they get the assistance of a digital forensic investigator named Deputy Anthony Cava. After going through as many call logs and text messages as humanly possible, he didn't think Cari was sending those messages to Dave, Liz, or anyone else who received them. But two questions remained: who and why? Who was and why would they have a reason to pose as Cari? The main reason for putting effort into something is to benefit in some way, and there was a lot of effort put into thousands upon thousands, 3 years worth of messages. So who would benefit from sending messages to Cari's loved ones in her name? It was especially cruel, given the fact that this person had tried to mislead Cari's mother and son into believing she was still alive and that she just didn't want to see them. That's really sad. So they decided only Cari's killer would have the motive to make it appear like she was still alive, which makes sense. We know that in cases of female victims, the perpetrator is often an intimate partner or a family member, and no one was profiting off of Cari's death. Her mother had gone to court, gained custody of Max, taking care of all the bills and the upkeep for Cari's house, knowing that someday it would belong to Max. So her mom wasn't profiting. Neither was Dave Krupa, the man that she was only dating for 2 weeks at the time when she went missing. But he was the last person to see her alive, and the two were in an intimate relationship at the time she went missing. But Dave had been extremely cooperative, and they actually ruled him out. That was when they shifted their focus to Liz Goyer. There was just report after report filed by Liz against Cari for harassment. So of course, they want to know all about Cari and Liz's interactions, because there should be none. These women should not be tied to one another because the only time they ever met, according to Dave, was on their first date, when Liz showed up and caused a scene and Cari merely walked past her on her way out of Dave's apartment. They crossed paths for maybe 10 seconds, if that. Well, then how do you explain several calls that were placed from Liz's phone to Cari's home phone a week before she went missing? And guess what? *67 was used. I'm sure you're familiar if you're maybe over 30, but it hides your number from the person you're calling. So why was Liz hiding her number and calling Dave's new woman? By Liz's own accounts, in all the reports that she filed against Cari, she said she never had contact with her before that brief encounter at Dave's. So why would she be calling her 6 times between November 6th and 7th? Well, now detectives go to that data dump of Liz and Dave's phones, specifically Liz's. And you know what they find? A picture of the back of Cari's vehicle. Now, the picture wasn't very clear, but they could tell it was a black vehicle with snow on top of it, and the license plates matched Cari's. Sure, it's a little weird taking a picture of a missing person's car, especially when it's the ex of the guy you're currently seeing. But what stood out was when this picture was taken. The metadata showed that it was snapped weeks prior to law enforcement locating it.
Well, this seems suspicious.
It definitely does.
Could Liz and Cari be in on this together?
The reason they're questioning that was because they find out that 2 days after Cari disappeared, she sent her supervisor a message that said, quote, "I won't be coming back. I'm taking a job in Kansas. Sorry for the short notice. I'm sending someone out to you to fill the position," end quote. Remember that? Well, the name of that applicant was none other than Shanna Goyer.
Wow. According to the supervisor, a few hours later, Shanna, or Liz, did come in and interview for Cari's position. She was ridiculously underqualified to be a computer programmer. She had zero coding skills, and her only employment was running her own house cleaning business. Accordingly, she wasn't hired for the job. Now that they had proof that within the days of Cari's disappearance, the name Shanna Goyer was connected with Cari 3 times. The phone calls, then the replacement for Cari's job, and as a buyer of Cari's antique bedroom furniture. So what was this about? Was this some elaborate game these women were playing, or was it more sinister? Was Liz involved in Cari's disappearance?
That's creepy. Now that they were looking at the full picture, the signs of Liz's obsession with Dave were all over this case. They found a series of photos that Liz had taken, you ready for this? This is crazy, of herself bound by rope and duct tape in the trunk of her car. The outtakes made it clear that Liz was never a victim of kidnapping. These photos were selfies. The photo she sent to Dave was cropped so that it looked like Liz was in danger. They also found a video on her phone, allegedly taken by Cari and posted to YouTube, and it was entitled, "My Husband's Cheating Place." Detectives were able to confirm the video was taken outside of Dave's apartment complex and uploaded to YouTube, but it was uploaded from Liz's phone, not Cari's. While the detectives didn't have enough evidence to arrest Liz, they did have enough evidence to determine that Cari was the victim of foul play and had been murdered. On May 8th, 2015, Detective Doty went to see Nancy in person, and he told her that they didn't think Cari had left on her own and that they were investigating her case as a homicide. And Nancy was overwhelmed with relief and gratitude. From the moment of that vivid dream, she knew her daughter was dead. It took another 2.5 years before anyone believed her. The detective was very interested in the photo that Nancy gave him of the check written by Shanna Goyer. He matched the signature on the check to Liz's signature on several traffic tickets. It was a perfect match. He thought it was interesting that their main suspect had tried to take both Cari's job and her furniture within days of her supposed disappearance. They would learn so much more. As they started to interview people who knew Liz, a picture was emerging about who this woman really was. A decade before all of this, Liz's ex-husband, Dirk Rhodes, and yes, that's his real name. It's not Dirt Rhodes, it's Dirk Rhodes. Gotta be careful. And you're just one letter away when you're choosing baby names. But Dirk got remarried to a woman named Melissa Strom after the divorce from Liz, who he had one child with named Peter. They shared custody of him after they broke up. And why did they break up? Because of Liz's jealousy. It was over the top, the husband said. Liz did all kinds of things to push her ex-husband, then girlfriend Melissa, out of his life. It started with the ugly stares, and then telling Dirk that she didn't want Melissa around their son, or when she dumped piles and piles of furniture and clothing outside of Melissa's front door, essentially locking her and barricading her in her house. It was all of Dirk's things that she threw out there attempting to return them. But it got worse. She began targeting Melissa. She was obsessed. She keyed her brand new car, and then she brought over cookies, homemade cookies, to say sorry after admitting she was the one that did it. But the thing was, she put cookies for her son and Dirk in one container, and for Melissa in a different container. They were the same cookies, right? The same. But Melissa joked they were probably poisoned, so she threw them away. I wouldn't eat those things.
Oh, I don't want special cookies from some weird ex.
No.
Later, Liz bought a car the exact same color as Melissa's. She changed her hair to the same color and got extensions to match the same length. She also began taking classes to become a pharmaceutical technician, just like Melissa.
Wow.
She stalked Melissa, never had any friends, and she'd sent letters to Melissa's work saying that Dirk was cheating with her and printed out blurry pics that were impossible to make out. But she insisted it was her and Dirk in bed together. That didn't work, so she then photoshopped pictures of Dirk in someone else's bed. None of this worked on Melissa. But she and Dirk divorced after 4 years, and though she wished it would have lasted longer, she was glad to get rid of Liz. But even after the divorce, Liz was still obsessed with Melissa, even pretending to be her. Melissa went to get an oil change, and the receptionist was like, "Oh, you were just in here," but she wasn't. She knew it was Liz pretending to be her. Melissa was so worried, so she started monitoring her credit, and it turns out that somebody opened a credit card in her name and bought $500 worth of cleaning products. And guess who happened to open her own cleaning business? Liz.
Wow, this woman is sick.
Melissa was stalked for years. Every time she moved to a new place, she would get things in the mail she'd never even ordered. It became obvious to detectives that at the very least, they were dealing with a very unstable woman.
Very unstable. And more investigation showed that back in 1998, when Liz was only 22, she had a baby with her then boyfriend Ray, a son named Cody. Well, Liz was a jealous girlfriend back then, just like she was with every other guy. And she was also with more than one man, but she swore to Ray that her guy friend, Neil, was just a friend. However, she moved in with him instead of Ray right before their baby was born. So Ray questioned if Cody was even his, but it was undeniable. They looked exactly the same when the baby was born. It turned out Neil, on the other hand, was Liz's boyfriend. And Neil had a son of his own as well, a few months older than Cody. Him and Liz lived with Neil's parents, and one day in January 1999, the usual colicky baby that cried all the time was silent when Neil and his mom had taken Cody shopping. Well, later, when Neil took Cody back inside, he became lifeless and he wasn't breathing. He called 911 and baby Cody was pronounced dead not too long after this from shaken baby syndrome. But Neil was adamant that he never shook Cody. He said the night before, Liz had called him when he was at work and said, "I dropped the baby, get home." But Cody seemed fine when Neil got back. Neil said, of course, he played with him in the past and would toss him up in the air, but that was it. But after hours and hours, he was exhausted. He was in this interrogation room with police. So he finally said, "Fine, I shook him." And he was arrested for Cody's death. Well, it usually takes a couple days for babies to show symptoms of shaken baby syndrome, and Neil swore it was Liz. Well, he ended up in prison for 8 years, and he begged Liz to come forward and admit what she told him on the phone the night before Cody died, but she let him take the fall. At her son's own funeral, she acted happy when she was showing off pictures of Neil's baby, as her own baby was lying lifeless in a tiny coffin nearby, with his dad hysterically crying. That is insane. That's probably one of the craziest things I've ever heard, and I've done a lot of cases.
What I find insane is how, the interrogation room will get you so, emotional or worked up that you would even admit to lying about you not doing something.
It's almost like waterboarding or any of those other things where you just can't take it anymore.
So you just admit to something you didn't do.
And because you didn't do it, you think, you know what? Okay, I'll say it, but then the evidence will show I didn't do it.
Right.
But that doesn't always work.
On December 4th, 2016, just as detectives were getting ready to approach Liz, she actually walked into the Potawatomi Sheriff's Office, not to turn herself in. No, she wanted to file a harassment complaint. But this time it wasn't against Cari Farver. She told detectives that a woman by the name of Amy was harassing her on Facebook and by text message. The person was none other than Amy Flora, Dave's ex-girlfriend, and the mother of his 2 children. She told investigators that the messages were so similar to the stalking messages she had received from Cari that she believed Amy had been sending the messages all along. She had a theory that Amy had been impersonating Cari out of jealousy in an effort to get Dave back.
Oh my gosh, she cannot be serious. This case drives me absolutely crazy. Now she's saying that Amy is the one sending all these messages.
Well, the detectives played dumb and pretended like they didn't know who she was talking about, but they knew. They had Liz go into the history of being stalked by Cari because of her relationship with Dave. She told them that she was no longer dating Dave, and in fact that he had moved to Iowa to be closer to Amy. She thought Amy could have even harmed Cari. Her reasoning was that it was more likely Amy and not Cari who only dated Dave for 2 weeks. She was scared because apparently someone had broken into Dave's apartment and stolen his gun, and only Amy and his kids had the keys.
Wow, someone stole his gun now? Liz forwarded all of these messages from Amy to the police, and she also gave them permission to take another digital download of her phone, except this time they took even more of a thorough download that allowed them to recover deleted photos and deleted data, so anything that used to be on her phone. Liz seemed thrilled that the police believed her, and the next day on Saturday, December 5th, 2015, in the evening, Liz decided to get some peace and quiet. She drove out to Big Lake Park and walked around the trail for a little bit, just taking in nature. And then she sat on the bench. And it was a cold, quiet night until a gunshot rang out.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
Oh, yeah. I've been shot in the leg. Oh
she look like at all?
No, she's behind me.
When police arrived, they discovered Liz wounded and bleeding. It was seeping from her thigh. It was evident she had been shot in the leg. In response, the search parties were immediately dispatched. Equipped with choppers and a big spotlight, they were combing through the park in search of an assailant. And despite their efforts, no one was apprehended. Liz was swiftly transported to the hospital where medical professionals attended to her injuries. Unfortunately, her condition was not critical. The bullet passed cleanly through her thigh, avoiding any major arteries and bones. Wow, she was so lucky. Like, what are the chances? And that's exactly what detectives on this case were about to be thinking. But before they even had a chance to be aware of all this, local police at the hospital questioned Liz about what happened. She said that after taking a walk, she was just sitting on a bench when a woman came up and put a gun to the back of her head. Liz said she was forced to the ground and then shot in the leg. She couldn't see her shooter, but luckily she recognized her voice.
Of course.
She identified it as the voice belonging to Amy Flora. And a few minutes later, a city police task force swiftly surrounded Amy's apartment. She was startled. She looked out the window and she noticed someone was leaning against her building and they shouted, "Open up, it's the police." She was confused. She was scared. She didn't know what to think. But of course, she complied. She unlocked the door. And to her shock, she found herself face to face with 3 officers with their guns drawn and pointed directly at her. She was alone with her toddler and infant. They yelled, "Shanna Goyer has been shot." And Amy, she was confused because she had always known her as Liz. But then she realized who they were talking about and she was like, "Oh my God, is she okay?" And that's when the officers informed her that Liz said Amy was the one that shot her. Of course, she's terrified. She's in shock. So she just starts crying and she says, "Of course I didn't." She said that she had been there for hours and that her son had just woken up from a nap. She denied ever being at a park or shooting Liz, and a neighbor verified that Amy's car had never left the driveway. She had been there all day and all night. When an officer touched Amy's vehicle, it was cold. It definitely hadn't come from a shooting 40 minutes away. They still searched her entire house and made her submit to a polygraph, which unfortunately for her showed deception. But at this time, Detective Kava, Doty, and Avis had put in thousands of unpaid hours to solve this case. As a matter of fact, one of them almost went through a divorce because all he cared about was solving this case. And he was off the clock, but working tirelessly. After that data dump of Liz's phone on December 4th, Kava was able to uncover some very incriminating evidence that Liz thought she had made disappear.
Ooh, what was it?
Well, it would take me all day to tell you every single thing. But for one, Liz was using an app called TextTie. And what it does is it connects all these fake email accounts that she created in order to send hundreds of emails to Dave's account. And Liz cleverly deleted everything to cover her tracks, but Kava retrieved it all. This was enough for him to get a search warrant to dig deeper into Liz's actions and request records from Google, Facebook, OkCupid, Twitter, Etsy, Pinger, Amazon, Meet Me, PayPal, Letter Me Later, and so many more under seal so that Liz wouldn't get tipped off and try to delete anything online that could potentially be lost because it takes a while for all those companies to get the records. So someone could potentially delete them and that's harder for them to recover. So she was trying to be, they were trying to be slick and not tip her off. Liz's IP address was the nail in the coffin. Now, she did use VPNs to conceal her IP. So it did take a lot more work to uncover every digital trail. So much so, Kava had a custom computer built to handle the staggering amount of evidence. He called the program that he created Dex, as in reference to index actually, but it was also a reference to Dexter, the TV show, which detectives had uncovered was Liz's favorite show. And interestingly, there was a dark-haired character in 2007 named Lila who stalked Dexter. And after they broke up, she even burned down her own apartment to get Dexter to feel bad for her when he was trying to pull away. It would take months for these detectives to compile everything. But they had something better, a fingerprint. Remember that fingerprint from the mint container in Carrie's car? Once they compared it to the one on file for Liz, it was a match. It didn't prove she murdered Cari, but all this evidence was mounting. They knew they had the right person, but they wanted to build a solid case before prematurely arresting her and charging her with Cari's murder. Besides, there was no body. Poor Dave had been suffering from confirmation bias. He didn't think Liz could be responsible for this. Even though Liz had no idea detectives were on her trail, they were able to get Dave alone to try to explain how dangerous she was. Dave had witnessed so many things while with Liz. It was really hard for him to understand what was going on because, you're like, what? How could this be possible? But that's when they told him she was using apps like Letter Me Later to time emails that she pre-wrote to be sent out to both Dave and her at the same time. She used later text to do the same thing. So she would program them all out and then send them at the same time. That is so
It's conniving.
evil. It is. Once confronted with all this, Dave couldn't believe that Liz would burn down her own house and kill her own pets. None of it made sense. The truth of the matter was Liz had been evicted from her house when she set it on fire. She didn't work. She was actually living with her boyfriend, Garrett Sloan, and she had already moved most of her things to his house. That's why she didn't want to give Dave her address, because she was living with her boyfriend. Remember that name, Garrett? Well, she was using him as another pawn in her game. This poor guy had been dating her for years, completely oblivious to her double life. The whole time she was dating Dave, she was also in a committed relationship with Garrett, or so he thought. He coincidentally worked in the IT department at Pottawatomie County, and he knew many of the officers in the police department. This poor guy did everything for Liz. He would watch her kid when she was supposedly working at night, but we all know that's not what she was doing. And she was hardly intimate with him. She actually slept in his basement, stole money from him and other belongings, and used him for her benefit. At one point in all this craziness, Garrett received a text from a Cari woman, who Liz told him was one of her friends. Well, this Cari began texting him all the time, trying to get him to cheat on Liz or say mean things about her. But Garrett, unlike Liz, was not evil or conniving or disloyal, and he stayed true to her, not knowing the monster she truly was. Yeah, you know what's worse? This poor man, he was like so devastated. He paid for the adoption fees for all those pets that she killed in this elaborate scheme to get Dave to fall in love with her. They were his pets. I mean, I think the snake was his. I mean, the pets were both of theirs. And Garrett never knew that she sent emails to Dave from a fake email account bearing his name. Liz manipulated many men, and she thought that she could manipulate the detectives too.
I'm still so blown away that a person is able to murder a helpless animal.
It's disgusting.
That's so disgusting. Yeah, she intentionally left her pets behind to suffer. But it wasn't so hard to believe when you coupled it with the likelihood she already murdered Cari by that time.
Oh my gosh.
But none of this was enough to charge her with Cari's murder. Liz was livid when she learned that Amy hadn't been arrested yet for shooting her. By this time, police thought Amy could be in danger. They encouraged Dave to move in with Amy, the mother of his children, until they could make an arrest. They told him that Liz was dangerous and he needed to protect his family. When Liz discovered that Dave had moved in with Amy, she was infuriated. She called the detectives crying and said it wasn't fair that Amy had stalked her for years and had likely harmed Cari, and now she gets to win and gets Dave back too?
Looks like the only person that benefited was her. So she gets to shoot somebody, and then she gets to kill another person, and then she gets to move in with Dave, and she gets to be free. And you guys aren't arresting her.
She is unhinged. She is the definition of unhinged. She crying to the detectives?
No kidding. Yeah, and saying that now Amy gets the win.
I don't see her point of view at all. And police told Liz that they wanted to arrest Amy, but they didn't have enough evidence. But if Liz wanted to, she could respond to the emails that she was getting from Amy and see if she could reveal any more evidence. They told Liz that if Amy were bold enough to shoot her, then she might be bold enough to have killed Cari too. They shared some confidential information with Liz. They lied, and they told her that some human remains had been found, and they believed they would be identified as belonging to Cari. Liz thought she knew what they needed, and she came back the very next day with an alleged email from Amy confessing to shooting her. Detective Doty said it was a good start to help build a case against Amy, but it wasn't enough. Nothing in Amy's confession proved that she had exclusive knowledge of the shooting. He told her if Amy had made like a threatening statement or inferred she'd done something to Cari, it would be strong evidence against her. And then they could put her away. So just 4 days later, Liz forwarded an email to Detective Doty, and the subject line said, quote, "I shot you," end quote. The email read in part, quote, "I shot you, Liz, to make sure Dave stayed away from you. I got rid of the gun. Looks like police haven't arrested me. No one has proof it was me," end quote. But Liz was disappointed to learn that there still wasn't enough evidence. Detective Doty told Liz that he needed specific details of Cari Farver's murder to build a case against Amy. Because Liz believed Cari's remains had been found, she knew she needed Amy to confess to the manner of death that matched the evidence that only she knew.
The case is regarding Cari Farver. Are you familiar with her?
Barely even know her.
Yeah.
Ran into her one time.
Okay.
Just bypassing her, going into Dave's apartment to pick up my stuff.
You got a pretty significant break in the case. Okay. There have been some remains that have been located.
Okay.
The initial indication is that these remains are Cari.
Okay.
Is there anyone that you think would want to hurt Cari?
I didn't know her long enough to know if anybody wanted to hurt her. She was with him for 12 years. And she still goes in and out of his life all the time. So.
Yeah. So you think she could have been the person that did some of that stuff to you?
I'm just saying, as another person who would be possessive of Dave, it would be her.
In my head, I'm thinking if she was bold enough to go and shoot you, okay, she could easily be bold enough to have done something to Cari. That's like gold to me if we had something like that.
Okay.
Because then we could start building a case. All right. Thank you much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
A few days later, Liz forwarded another email to Detective Doty, allegedly from Amy. And in this email, Amy confessed in part, quote, "When I met Crazy Cari, she would not stop talking about Dave and him being her husband. She tried to attack me, but I attacked her with a knife. I stabbed her 3 to 4 times in the stomach area. I then took her out and burned her. I stuffed her body in a garbage can with trash. She was carried out to the dumpster, probably when Dave took my garbage out for me. So be glad I did not do you that way, Liz. I will never admit to Dave or the police. No one. Maybe I'm drunk now and just telling lies to you. Dave will always take care of me and protect me, so I will never go to jail. When I followed you that night, I shot you. I left Mason home because he was sleeping. Made sure I called Dave and texted him for my alibi, so you can never prove it was me," end quote. Amy allegedly sent another confession letter, this time confessing to the arson, and the subject line said, quote, "Effin' crazy biatch." And the email read in part, quote, "Now that I've got your attention, don't ever come back around my kids, Dave or me. Just like your house getting burned was me, that's another thing that Dave won't believe either," end quote. And these emails allegedly from Amy said that no one would believe Liz if she reported these crimes. And all this time, the detectives could tell that the emails were coming from Liz's account.
Amazing.
All of these emails she created. Oh my gosh, I can't.
She's just falling right into their trap.
Of course she was, but she thought she was so smart.
Garrett was so desperate to end things that he paid for a moving truck and gave her first and last month's rent for an apartment. Over the next few weeks after she moved, Liz talked to Detective Doty several times, making sure that the murder investigation into Amy was still progressing. Meanwhile, Dave was in a state of shock. He couldn't believe how long he had been duped by Liz. When the detectives asked him if he had any electronic devices that Liz had ever used, he said he might have a tablet in storage. That tablet had evidence needed to finally arrest Liz.
Wow, I swear you're not going to believe this, but at some point, an SD card from the tablet had been used in Liz's phone. And among the deleted files was a photo of a shower curtain identical to one that had been purchased on Cari's debit card after the murder. Remember, there were unusual charges on her card. Well, one of them was for a shower curtain. There was also a photo of 2 distinctive tattoos. One was a photo of a yin-yang tattoo, and the second photo was of a foot with a Chinese letter on it. The letters were for the word mother in Chinese. Nancy Rainey confirmed that Cari had both of these tattoos, but it was the photo of the foot that led to Liz's arrest. It had signs of discoloration that come with decomposition. Liz had taken a photo of Cari's decomposing foot.
I wonder if Liz was going to get that tattoo because she wanted to be Melissa.
I know, right? Why would she purposely take photos? This reminds me of Jodi Arias. Like maybe the camera went off. I don't know. This just does not seem real.
They had also gone back and found the new owner of Cari's Ford Explorer. With Amy's alleged faked confession, they took another look at the seats of Cari's old car. When they peeled back the cover of the passenger seat, they found a large stain that looked like blood. When they had tested it, it matched Cari Farver's DNA.
Wow. So now the police believe that Liz confronted Cari either at Dave's apartment that morning, like after Dave left, or when Cari was leaving to get into her Ford Explorer. They believe the attack happened before 11 a.m. They don't know any more specifics other than Cari was most likely stabbed and her body was burned and disposed of in Liz's trash. Now, Garrett came forward and he said he couldn't give them an exact date, but he distinctly recalls going over to Liz's house one afternoon and the whole place smelled like something had been burning. Liz told him that her and her friends, the friends she never had a party the night before, and they smoked some cigarettes and the smell was still lingering. But Garrett thought that was kind of odd because one, he wasn't invited and he was her boyfriend, and she didn't have any friends. At least he had never met any of them, but he didn't really think much of it at the time.
Now, the reason why you're in this chair right now today is because you have a lot of questions that you need to answer for me. Her phone was at your house right after she disappeared. Now I want to ask you how you can explain that to me, please.
She's never been to my house.
Your fingerprints are inside her vehicle. How would your fingerprints be inside her vehicle?
I don't know, because I've never been in her car.
You drove her car.
No, I didn't. I've never been inside her car. I've never even been around her car. Ever.
Your fingerprints are in there.
No, I haven't. I'm not lying. I've never been around her car. I've never even seen it.
For years and years, people have been sending emails under Cari's fictitious accounts. The IP addresses show up to whose house? Your house.
I haven't had internet at my house.
Are you going to sit in this chair and be remorseful? Or are you going to sit in this chair and be cold-blooded? Because right now, after 4 years, this family's been looking for answers. Why would you create all these emails?
I haven't created any emails.
All these have been coming from your
they're not.
House.
And I'm not going to be accused of something that I didn't do.
Her finger's pointing right at you.
And I'm done talking, and I'm going to have my attorney, because I didn't do anything.
On the morning of December 22nd, 2016, 4 years after Cari's disappearance, police finally arrested Liz for the first-degree murder of Cari Farver. Liz maintained her innocence throughout her trial, which began on May 10th, 2017. Liz knew the evidence against her looked bad, but she was still banking on the fact that no body meant no crime.
She chose to actually waive her right to a jury trial and allowed the judge to determine her guilt or innocence. The evidence of the extent of Liz's deceit was extensive. It was determined she spent, get ready for this, 40 to 50 hours a week for 3 years impersonating Cari. Imagine she'd actually applied herself. She could have done something really good with her life. But in their opening statement, the prosecutor presented a gripping narrative portraying Liz as an obsessive woman who would stop at nothing to obtain her desires, and her desire was Dave Krupa. The state sought to convince the court that Liz's actions were driven by an unwavering determination to obtain what she wanted, regardless of the consequences. Her defense attorney claimed it's all circumstantial. But Liz was ultimately found guilty of first-degree murder and second-degree arson for killing her pets. And Liz was angry. She asked her attorney to get a plea deal, and he was like, it's a little late for that. So Shanna Elizabeth Goyer was sentenced to life in prison. She was also sentenced to an additional 18 to 20 years for that fire. I cannot even believe she killed her animals. That's still bothering me. I mean, the fact that she killed a human too, but then her own animals.
Liz filed an appeal with the Nebraska Supreme Court, requesting that they reverse her conviction. She argued that since no one had witnessed the murder and neither a body nor a weapon had been found, it was a reversible error. Obviously, the Supreme Court ruled against her.
And as for Cari's poor family, they carried the weight of the grief with them every single day. The pain of losing Cari never truly goes away. Her son Max is now married, and he followed in his mom's footsteps. He's now a computer programmer and a data scientist, which is pretty cool. And Dave Krupa has cooperated with Leslie Rule's book, which I'm linking below, called A Tangled Web. And it has so many more details. You want to know how twisted this case is, I highly recommend. And Dave has also gone on several Dateline episodes, and he has promised to participate in any programs, any TV shows about this case. He said that he wants to support Cari's mother in any way that he can, since he feels responsible for getting her daughter killed. Nancy Rainey has said she doesn't blame Dave, and she views him as another victim. Both he and Cari were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they crossed paths with an evil person. Cari's family is happy that her name has been cleared and that her legacy of kindness lives on in her son Max. This has been a extremely just insane case. And going back through everything we now know, that it was Liz this entire time.
Right. Imagine being Dave thinking like, oh, at least now I can commiserate with Liz who's going through the same thing. Secretly, it's Liz the entire time.
It's truly like when they say sleeping with the enemy, that's what this is. It's like you're comforting the woman who killed this beautiful lady that you thought you were going to have even like a remote future with, you know what I mean? And then thinking all along that she was doing it. And that's why the family really wanted to clear her name. We just want to thank all of you for being here for Cari's story and another episode of Darklivity.
Yeah, thanks for watching. And please make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell
so you don't miss any of our other videos. All right, we'll see you in the next one. Bye.